Izaji, tukiwa tumekuandalia taarifa za kusisimua, mziki wa kata viungo na kindumbwe cha siasa au politics ukipenda. We are streaming live on Facebook from Kilimanjaro studios outside Washington DC, and we will shortly be going live on YouTube, so please call in all your YouTube friends. Please remember to subscribe to both our YouTube and Facebook pages at The One Mic Show, and follow us on Instagram at One Mic Show. We are also on TikTok, so please follow us on TikTok, and we are also taking live calls tonight at 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. So save that number. That's 202-683-4570. Press star 5. Later tonight, we'll catch up on President Ruto's upcoming official White House visit and the catastrophic floods that have ravaged Kenyans and left dozens of people dead. What questions will you have for President Ruto when he touches down in DC less than 3 weeks from now? Please start dropping comments below on your thoughts and what you would tell President Ruto if you had a chance to talk to him. Na bila kusahau, tunapokea mziki toka DJ wetu machachari mleta habari DJ Moshfire, na tutadunda kule viwanjani na Mika Och. Mika Och leo hayuko, nambari 7 mgogoni. Kawaida yake anatuletea habari za michezo, lakini kwa sasa yuko Kenya. So moja kwa moja toka Kilimanjaro studios ni mimi mtangazaji na mwanahabari wako mpendwa Ali Badawi. Kwetu wananiita mteule na wengine mniite mjukuu wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui na sibagui. Karibuni.
Now, let's talk politics.
Now, today we have an election 2024 special, and we'll be talking to our US political and cultural contributor, Ms. Annette Karanja. She'll tell us how our African communities can be more impactful on electoral outcomes this coming November, and she'll also highlight our House and Senate races that may shift the balance of power in Capitol Hill. So please drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuned in from and what you want to hear from Annette tonight. And I'm your co-host and producer, Ali Badawi. It is Friday the 3rd of May, and we are streaming live from Kilimanjaro studios outside Washington, D.C. Now, please remember to follow The One Mic Show on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. TikTok is being banned in the U.S., or rather has been banned in the U.S. House and Senate. Annette will be talking about that later on in the show and what that means. And of course, on panel with me tonight is Mr. OneMic Kamakawa. Mika Och is out tonight. Our resident DJ Moshfire is already live on the decks. And not forgetting super producer Mubelwa Bandio, ambaye yuko hapa pembeni. Now, before we get started tonight, I want to welcome, like everyone who's tuned in. I can see Afro-Jamaican is back. Afro-Jamaican is tuned in, and I can see he already has the at highlight at everyone. Those are some of the tags you get to get other people to tune into the One Mic Show. Udi the Don, Udi Madenge is already tuned in. Karibu sana Udi. And then I can see also Washekendi Rangu is tuned in. I can see Slay is tuned in. Slay anasema, will you touch on Baltimore, or will this be touching on a little on other states as well? So Slay, you have to stay tuned in to find out. When you tune in, you'll get to know this. So siwe na hofu. And then Rasvik pale anasema hello. Now Udi says, I voted last election, but I waited till last day to avoid the line. So I don't know exactly what that means, to avoid the line, because I think on the last day of election day is kind of like when the lines are longest, but maybe Udi can tell us a bit more about that. And Udi is in Georgia. Georgia, big time battleground state. This can determine who's going to become president in November. So this will be a big one, because remember, Georgia was very, very narrow in the last election. Biden's victory was very narrow. So this is something that we're going to be looking out again in this election. And then Udi further says, for Ruto, how can you deal with issues with a medical facility? I believe Udi is talking about the floods that are going on, and of course we're going to be talking about these floods later on in the show. It's really affected the country in a big way, and people are having these very serious conversations on why did we vote for X and why did we vote for Y. People are sleeping on top of mabatis. People are being swept away by water. Yeah. We are seeing boats capsizing, and quite a number of people who are dead. So we're going to be talking about that. So want you to stay tuned. But going back to tonight, we of course privileged to host our US politics and cultural contributor, Ms. Annette Karanja. Now, Annette, of course, is a second-generation Kenyan raised in Baltimore, Maryland. She's a political activist who focuses on social justice and economic and political rights for immigrants specifically. Now, last year, Annette was appointed by Baltimore County Mayor Johnny O to the New Americans Task Force, and she'll be talking about that shortly. She also received a Public Service Award from the Baltimore County local chapter of the Democratic Party. She'll also tell us about that. Now, Annette has a passion in political mobilization and assisting Kenyans access government services. So you want to stay tuned, Slate, to know how to access your government services in the state of Texas. Annette is here to help you. Now, of course, she's here today to talk about how African communities can impact this year's electoral outcomes in November. Now, with the return of Donald Trump at stake, Annette will also highlight some key issues and Senate races that may shift the balance of power in Capitol Hill. Annette, welcome back to the OneMic Show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm always happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay. Now get a little bit closer to the mic, or maybe get the mic closer to you.
All right.
But we're very happy to have you here. Now, just to get us started, like you were here last year in October, and we're going to get back to that. You had been appointed to the New Americans Task Force. You had won an award at that particular time. So maybe just for those maybe who are seeing you for the first time, talk to us about what's a New Americans Task Force. What do you guys do? And what have you been up to since the last time you were here in October last year?
And how much the sitting allowance is?
So perfect. All right, let's talk about it. So I was here in October. The New Americans Task Force is an initiative that started by Baltimore County Executive Johnny Olszewski, and this is part of a response to a research that was done that said that during this last few years, especially post-pandemic, all of the growth in Baltimore County was because of initiatives that were made by New Americans, and New Americans meaning immigrant individuals starting businesses, creating solutions to all of the issues that we were all facing during the pandemic times. So with this being the case, it was interesting to figure out how can we then not only support this growth that's happening, but what are the things that are being experienced by these individuals? Because we're talking about businesses, we're talking about students in, elementary school up to high school and also college students. What can we do to make sure that the integration of this population does so in a way that optimizes for the entire county, right? Because we all succeed when everyone is able to succeed. The result of this was actually what I have here, it physically is a welcoming and belonging strategic plan. So different stakeholders within the county were able to participate in this New American Task Force, and they represented different areas. So we had people from the ISB, which is the Islamic Society of Baltimore, and then we also had individuals from the Kenyan community like myself, people from Hispanic communities, faith organizations, food drives. So many different diverse people came together to come up with a plan on how different agencies can actually create policies that are going to benefit every single person in the county, including immigrants specifically, because we have a unique experience.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome DJ Omoshfire. DJ Omoshfire is also in studio. DJ Omoshfire, karibu sana. Are you aware of what Annette has been doing with the New Americans Task Force? And are you a New American or are you an old American? DJ Omoshfire.
Asante sana. Annette, welcome to the show. So, it sounds like, per her Annette's definition, I'm a new American.
Well, what makes you a new American?
Because that's that whole, you're an immigrant, new business, those sorts of things. That's what makes you a new American.
Okay.
You didn't listen to the definition.
No. I mean, we're gonna go back.
Clear.
To
you are not in class, but it's okay. It's all right. It's okay. However, you asked also if I have heard of this thing, the report, and all of these things, and I am. This is news.
Okay.
I know nothing.
Okay, and Annette
so as a new American,
that.
Clearly I might be old.
You might be an old American.
Yes.
Okay. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome Mike, who's also in the building. Mike, are you a new American or are you an old American?
He's a Baltimorean.
Kwanza mi I'm a new American, and by way of Murang'a. By way of Murang'a.
No, everybody knows one Mike is from Baltimore.
By way of Murang'a.
Murang'a.
Murang'a. I know you want to say Kangemi.
There's no Muranga
But
in Baltimore.
I was actually they had a session in Baltimore, and I can't remember the lady's name, but she was there, and a group of Kenyans came, and there was also a Zoom session, so we participated, and guys virtually through Zoom. So guys contributed and suggested. You know, they just, you know, what their fears are, what their concerns were. Like if you're a new immigrant coming in, the reception, what's going on, services that can be rendered, what, you know, stuff like that. And it was an amazing session for me to attend, because I was just going there to listen.
Yeah. Now, for you attending, do you think this would have been useful? You know, because remember when we were new in this country, we were always experiencing this thing of you didn't know something until you stumbled upon something. You didn't know that this benefit was available, or you didn't know you could go to college. There's an option here and there's an option there. So do you think this would be beneficial to especially Kenyans who are fresh in the country?
Very beneficial.
Okay.
Because no one was there to voice, you know, kutetea wanyonge.
Okay.
But now we have somebody, you know, like Annette is there, and she's always on the forefront of trying to get the Kenyans in Baltimore, Baltimore County. You know, you start locally. Yeah. To participate. You know, get involved. Come in. We have a session. You know, she'll send us Zoom links. You know, we'll be having. You know, we'll have a town hall. That's what I was looking for. You'll have a town hall. Participate, because eventually, you know, if you're not at the table,
you're gonna be on the menu.
You are the menu. You are the menu. You are the meal right there.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to participate.
Okay.
You know, it's okay to work and everything, but it's very important. You have your leg here, you have your kids here, and our kids are growing old. So at some point in time, they will move from 5 to 15 to
25.
Yes. Yeah. What are we going to do for them? How are you going? And especially with the current state of, you know, for lack of a better word, you know, whatever is going on racially right now. Your kids are black, yes. They may not speak Kikuyu, the Luo, whatever, but they're black.
So I think, you know, like, just getting back to you, Annette, I think it's very good that we have a Kenyan who was raised here, not Kenyans who came here as adults, who understands, you know, like the system from an American perspective, but also lives within the community and understands, you know, like what, you know, the Kenyan community, for example, goes through, and you're able to be that like interface between the American local governments and the Kenyan community, because I believe, you know, like there's organizations in other states, you know, like we have Texas where we have a lot of people. I believe there's organizations out there too that are doing similar things. Yeah. And I think, you know, like maybe to get to another level, I know your focus is on Maryland, maybe you could also just maybe do some mini research to help Kenyans who are pockets of Kenyans. Atlanta, Kina Udimadenge, but Texas, you know, we have Slay, we have Washeke, we have people in California who are tuned in. So if you maybe if you could just do like a mini research and help them out, because despite being here for many years, I think I still strongly feel that Kenyans are still fairly politically illiterate, especially on ground politics, on matters America. I don't know how you feel about that, because you interact with more people in that respect.
I would not say fairly.
I love that statement, because it's a challenge now to Kenyans to actually be more literate and to be more involved and to stay tuned and not to be a passenger when it comes to the things that are happening in your community, and actually taking the initiative to be involved. So one thing that I will say is that there are pockets of the communities, even outside of the Kenyan Americans, whereby they're not involved, they're disengaged, and it has ramifications. And usually there's something that kind of stirs up the energy, and we're seeing that happening right now. And people are getting involved who might usually have not even been a participant in the primary. The primary election is when we choose which Democrat, which Republican, which Green Party, who is going to be the one representing, right? Many people wait until November, and it's like whoever everyone else selected, that's the person that we're going to choose. we're getting to a point right now whereby there are issues on the ballot that are going to be very consequential to our everyday lives and to our values and belief systems. And so people are getting galvanized. What I want to do is to make that process easier, to make it more digestible. A lot of things sometimes are, you know, as a person who is so brilliant that you know like 3-4 languages, right? But this one particular language has gone out of its way to use language that is just so foreign and so deep that you might not have access to it. What I want to do is simplify it. I want it to be accessible. I want the language to be something that you can understand, so that when you're making decisions, you're not making decisions just because Annette said, go make this decision, but you're making informed decisions. That is the point, right? That is when the collective actually is powerful, because you don't have dictators, whether it's community leaders telling you to do one thing. Like, you actually have the ability to access information, which is super important, and then make decisions that align with your values and your goals.
Good. Now, you talked about, you know, like the November elections, how
Yes.
some people just decide, I know election is in November, the first Tuesday after Monday, so I'll wait until then to vote. What is it that all these states that have not voted in their primaries, you know? So I believe, you know, like Texas hasn't voted. I don't know whether Georgia has already voted. I don't think they've voted. So for those people who are just sitting back, relaxing, and saying, I'm just going to wait for November, what is it that they're going to be missing out if they don't participate in the primary voting process? Annette.
There's two parts. So number one, when it comes to the primary, this is when you're going to have probably the most amount of candidates that you can look at. And we're seeing that across the board with open seats that are happening congressionally, especially within the House. And we have a couple within the Senate where someone might be retiring, whatever the case may be, right? So what's happening is these seats are up for debate up until the primary. And many of them, by November, we know the Democrat is going to win, or we know the Republican is going to win.
Yes.
But it's not per se going to be the Republican that was there before, or the Democrat that was there before. So if there is something that you are frustrated about during this representative's time, and it doesn't matter what political party you yourself identify with, that person is your representative if you live within their district.
Okay.
So if you're frustrated with some of the things that are going on, the primary is the only time to really let them know, so that there can be a change in behavior or a change in your experience. The primary is very, very indicative of what your everyday life experience is going to be.
Now, you talked about congressional races.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Washeke is out there in Texas. She's
Okay.
living her life. She's enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Congress is in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
Why should Washeke care about who's going to end up on the ballot, or who's going to become their representative in Congress, or for that matter, Udi or Slay, or we even have Canadians who are listening, you know, like Afro-Jamaican. I don't know whether he wants to come to America. I doubt it, but they're also interested in the American political system.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for people who are just in these different congressional districts, you know, like they're living their life, you know, like they're going for their get-togethers, their chama meetings. Everything is going for them.
Right.
So why should they care about who's running for Congress or who's going to win that congressional seat?
So if you're in a place like Texas, which is interesting because there's a lot of wealth there, but then you also have very rural areas, and then you also have the border.
Pockets,
there are just
yeah.
so
much going on.
things that are very, very important depending on where you are located. And not every single district within Texas is going to agree with each other, you know, and you can see plenty of memes about it. Like Dallas people are different from Houston people, who are different from San Antonio people, and so on and so forth. The reason why this is important is because within your own district, you might have, you know, some sort of like metropolitan issues that are going to be different than those in the rural areas. We have a lot of Republicans that are in Texas, right? That's a red-leaning state. But within that pool of Republicans that are there are individuals who might be interested in some of the issues that are important to you that might not necessarily fit under a typical Republican issue in another state like Maryland. And so this is talking about, you know, there are Republicans who have been in Congress trying to extend and expand benefits for those who are receiving SNAP, which is the way that some individuals, or EBT, which is how some individuals.
That's what
are
used to be
getting
called food stamps.
Food stamps,
Okay.
yeah. So those Republicans are saying, okay, this is actually not a party issue. This is an issue of how are we going to make sure that students and families are being fed within our state. Now, if you are in a state who has a Republican signing on to this bipartisan type of legislation, then you're in a good position if that's something that is important to you. There are some states where the idea might be that, you know what, it doesn't matter as long as it's not, as long as it's negatively affecting the budget or affecting the budget in a way that we don't like, we're not going to support it. So it's not just being Republican or being a Democrat. It's being an individual who's going to support the specific issues that are important to you. So my question would be, what is important to you in Texas?
Okay.
And is your leadership actually doing things to make sure that those things are going in a way that is going to be most beneficial to everyone, but also specifically you?
All right, talk to us, Texas. Tell us what's most important to you. Udi here is telling us we just got our voting cards. That's in Georgia. We have like 10 positions we need to vote for. Udi, please list some of those 10 positions here so that people can understand, you know, like what's at stake. It's not only congressional races. And then Udi
I wonder
further
if
says,
Stacey's on the ballot.
who?
Stacey.
Oh, Stacey Stacey
Not this
Abrams.
time around.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think this
She
time
worked
around,
hard.
but-
Somebody just needs to put her there because they're putting her there.
Yeah, and then Udi is also saying
I don't know about
let's also encourage early voting. So that's something that you're going to talk about.
Love
What is
that.
early voting? What is mail-in voting? And then Udi also says I like the idea of town halls, and then Udi Leo is on fire. He's telling Annette, can we have a conference like the diaspora conference in DC? A lot of Kenyans will be willing to travel. So Udi, tell us what you would want in this conference. So this is, you're talking about like a conference for Kenyans in
Yeah,
DC.
that sounds like a good thing for this visit that's coming up, as well as the embassy.
Okay, that's within 2 weeks. That might be short notice.
No,
but
what
it's
I'm
a good
saying,
idea.
you know, because there's always that list of what do Kenyans want.
Yes.
What are folks in the diaspora wanting?
Okay.
Right. So you could give it there. It can be given to the diaspora desk or our diaspora rep. It can be taken to the embassy. I mean, there's, you know, so many steps and ways that this, you know, but that is actually, and I know why he's saying that, because he was a beneficiary of.
He was a beneficiary. He actually got a job
Yes.
from a diaspora conference in Kenya.
Correct.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, that's
And I
really
think
amazing.
it's important not just to have the conversation about let's do that, but can we talk about the practical parts, like what
Practicality.
you're saying, but also who's going to fund this? Because in the past, when there have been diaspora meetings, the diaspora has funded it, and I find that problematic because there's a budget that certain people have, and me having to spend out of my own money just to get an audience with certain people, and then might not get the actual results of what the meeting is about is very frustrating, and it's going to disenfranchise certain people and disillusion certain people. So
And you know, to get off on a tangent a bit, you know, a little bit out of topic, just based on what you've said, because we want to stick to topic today. There's something in Kenya that's called CDF, Constituency Development Fund, and then there's some money that the county governments also receive from the national government. The problematic part that I have with this is that because this is still a fairly new process, money is not following functions.
Right.
So there's certain functions or tasks that the national that were devolved to the county governments, but the national government is still holding the money. So the function has been devolved. You know, like I can quote, you know, like Wajir Governor, I think his name is Ahmed Abdullahi. He said when devolution started, there were like, I think 700 or 800 doctors who had been seconded to the counties. Now there's about 4,000. But then the money that's being sent is still almost the same amount. So there's that issue, you know, and then there's an issue of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What have you done for yourself? You know, why can't you come together and host a diaspora conference? I know that's something that a lot of Kenyan government officials sometimes like singing, but there's taxpayers' money.
They're not practical.
There's funding.
They're not being practical,
Yeah.
because there's even the corporates that would potentially gain from this workforce that's here, who would, the brain power that would go over there and make changes within those guys will sponsor.
Yes.
But somebody has to start it, meaning that there has to be a shell, And it has to start from the folks in Kenya at the diaspora desk. But because those folks who are coming in there are all new, they don't have a clue. They don't understand what the actual, in fact, I would question how many of those people who are running in or who are working in the diaspora desk or in the diaspora area have lived in the diaspora.
There's lack of experience and lack also of institutional memory. There's people who have institutional memory.
They can go back and ask.
The problem is that when regimes change, everybody comes with their own new characters. So these other people, they're already out. So unless you pay them and as consultants from their
basically
side.
what you're saying is that there isn't a system in place, and these are not issues that are new. There's nothing new under the sun. You can have a similar experience here in the U.S. During the pandemic. There was pandemic money that was given out on a federal level, and certain states did not release that money then to their localities, and that's the same thing that you're describing. So what this boils down to is, what is the system in place for that? Because someone who's coming into the job doesn't need to learn the job brand new every single time, even if they are a different character. But if you don't have now that transition, I've had the fortunate experience of being on transition teams, whereby changing from one leadership into another leadership, you have a team of people who helps you plot out how are we going to make this transition as smooth as possible and make it in a way that the citizen is not going to be negatively impacted by the change, so that there is the transition that is
and
smooth.
There's also knowledge sharing. There's got to be some knowledge that is being passed from previous to the next, and there's records kept as a knowledge base that you go to.
But I think an important difference in the American system and in the Kenyan system is that when people are being transitioned out in the Kenyan system, in the American system, like in most governments, there's a core civil service part that's not necessarily tied to politics, that will continue operating regardless of who's on top. So the problematic part in Kenya is that all these parts move away. And this civil service part, and we're talking about the Fed, these are the core who make the cogs move, who make processes
I guess the worker bees.
Yeah. So but the problem in Kenya is that sometimes all these people get swept out, or they get sent to other departments, because all new people want to bring in their new people, and the new people who are coming in have also other smaller new people, and the smaller new people have other smaller new people. So it becomes.
So are you saying even the person who brings chai will be changed?
So I'll give a quick example here, not to get diverted. In Mombasa County, people, even basic services as drivers, there was a time during Governor Joho's raid, and he was even saying this is a problem. There were I think 20-something drivers who were there supposedly at the governor's disposal as the governor's driver. So they got employed at some point because before Mombasa had a mayor, before it transitioned into governorship. So unasikia huyo letwa na mayor flani, huyo letwa na flani. So now they're adding to the wage bill, but then there's 20 people who come every day and they have absolutely nothing to do because they were employed. And then you don't want to remove them, because if you remove them, when you go out, your people will also be taken away. So, and this introduced a phenomena called ghost workers. People who are on a payroll, but they're not actually doing anything. But swiftly moving back to our topic, Washeke says civil engagement starts at the PTA, school board, district, decisions that impact how much and property taxes, new school redistricting that affects many of us who are parents are made there. So that's, I think, also another very important part, Annette, I wanted you to talk about, seats other than congressional seats. Board of Education, because we have a lot of parents here. What is it that people need to know about Board of Education seats? Because I'm sure in those ballot papers that Odi has received, I'm sure there's some Board of Education seats there. Talk about that, Annette.
So in the state of Maryland, or let me not say in the state of Maryland, in each district they have a different way of doing the Board of Education seats. A lot of times they're supposed to be nonpartisan, but maybe they are partisan, meaning that one is Republican, or one is a Democrat, or one is Green Party, or one is, independent. And so that's important to note, because if you are in an area whereby it's supposed to be nonpartisan, so you just get a list of names, Republicans, Democrats, everyone gets the list of names. You don't know their
And to be clear, nonpartisan doesn't mean they don't belong to a party.
It doesn't mean that they don't belong to a party. It means that the seat is not a political party.
So you don't have to declare. So it doesn't say Republican or Democrat.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
That requires an individual to do a little bit of research. And one of the things that has really brought this to attention, especially for members of the diaspora like us, is the fact that we have groups like Moms for Liberty who are trying to require that certain books are not in the libraries and that students don't have access to certain books. Now, the ban lists have been, those who have looked at what the ban lists include, there really isn't a specific issue in many of these books, apart from how people are illustrated or the group of people that are the focus on there. Now, there are some other issues that maybe parents might be concerned about,
like the alphabet issues.
So when the book is in the library, it doesn't mean that your child has to read the book, but the book being in the library means that your child has the opportunity to encounter it. Okay. And for someone like myself who grew up in, of course, media is so different today than how it was when I was a child, but the type of media I had access to was in the libraries, especially in school. So what my teachers had on their bookshelves had a very big impact on my self-image and my understanding of the world around me. And so it's very, very challenging for individuals who come from a diverse background. And mind you, we have to just accept the fact that this country is very, very diverse, right?
It is. Mm-hmm.
So going into a space or putting your child into a space whereby they don't have any representation of themselves or something that make them feel at home or welcomed can be an issue.
Okay. All right. That's good. And Washeke says, and school boards have become so powerful.
Yes.
YouTube women are using are using that to remove African American curriculum, Exhibit A, Moms for Liberty. Mm-hmm. And some of these groups are actually trying to, let me not use the word meddle, but they're trying to influence board elections in different districts.
Yes. I think earlier in this conversation, we talked about organizing, and this might have been an offline conversation to bring it online. When it comes to elections, there are people who are organizing, and they're thinking years in advance, and they're thinking about the nitty-gritty. So for a group of individuals like us who might be getting to know this for the first time, especially if you just came from the diaspora, you haven't been here for more than 10 years, it might seem overwhelming to understand all of these things. My point is that there are individuals and groups who are conspiring to have a certain result, and they've been thinking about this long and hard for years. And so it's your responsibility to understand what power you have, and it is at the ballot, to counteract some of this. Moms for Liberty, I can imagine that if you are here and you hear that name and you don't know what it is, it kind of sounds nice. Honestly,
it
sounds very polite, and even the word
sounds
liberty
like liberated moms.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I might think that that's something I want to be a part of. You have to actually go and find out what are they all about? Yeah. What is the definition? What is their mission statement? And if their mission statement has to do with anything that would, that would contradict your own values and the things that you're trying to do as a person here in the States, that's something that you want to take the time to do. And here's the thing: people say it's overwhelming, it's too much information. Google is so fast. Moms for Liberty. What is Moms for Liberty? Like, what are they about? 10 seconds. Now, if you're like myself, you might go into a TikTok rabbit hole and, be on there for quite some time, but you can get that information quickly. There is nothing inaccessible to you now that we have the ability to search. And educate yourself on how to do quality searches, because not everything that's on the internet is true, but if you can have 3 verifiable sources, then you can get an understanding of what's going on.
They are the modern day United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yes.
Now, it's interesting.
UDC.
United
Daughters of the
talk about that, because some people are hearing about that.
Even me in the county, we've never heard of this.
So the United Daughters of the Confederacy came about in the early 20th century. And they were very influential in the South in changing the curriculum, whitewashing history. So the books they facilitated the books to be written in such a way that they softened slavery and what slaves went through. And they did that,
and they turned Confederate generals into heroes.
Yes, and and they did that too. So the monuments in the South, they were like 100,000 deep.
I think
United Daughters of the Confederacy.
I think what's interesting to say about that is when it comes to history, there are some Americans or individuals who might not understand the intricacies of the Civil War and why it happened and what the reasons is.
Google.
What the reasons are. Now, you can Google. I would say if you ever go to the South and visit a plantation or go to a museum and actually read the letters that were going on between the generals. This is where like you and I are having a conversation right now where it's in person and there's some level of familiarity. You're gonna get a more insightful version versus if I were to write an essay right now and give you the clean version, of what the thoughts are there. Although even in those formal texts within the Confederacy, it was very clear what the issue was. And the issue was about economics, and it was about the impact of losing slavery on the economic power that they had in the South. And so to say that was not the case would be a flat out contradiction to what the generals at that time were saying, and that's what we're seeing right now with some of the changing of what is being taught. I was taught that slavery was a factor, but I was also taught that other things were a factor. I believe that was true. Now, if we emphasize those other things and not what the original issue was, now that's on the line of misinformation.
Now bring it back to the conversation of school boards. Most of the Kenyan parents who are out here, most African parents, do not have familiarity with that American history. And this is where a bridge like yours becomes very important, because everything that happens in America, all these things that you see, there's a background to it. There's a backdrop to it. The police departments have, like a backdrop of once being slave patrols. Like there's always a historical background to all these nice, flashy institutions and organizations that you see. And it's always important to go back and look. But now the challenge is because a lot of, people who came here as adults are not familiar with that history. Some of us had a chance of encountering it in college, but for those who are not familiar with it, there's this tendency of defending. And I don't know whether you've experienced it, whereby you'll hear people start saying, there's no racism, it's the black people here who complaining, and this is something that I personally had. I don't know whether you've experienced it, but there's that tendency to try to defend the system as is. When someone comes out to you and tells you, you gotta be concerned about, who you elect on your school boards and everything. How do you deal with that kind of challenge where you're talking to people who are just so happy to be here, they don't see anything wrong, and they're just going about their lives day to day?
I think multiple things can be true at one time, and this is a very important point, especially if you have a family. Multiple things can be true at one time. I want to speak on something that is tangentially related. There's a study that went out that said that when it came to the women's mortality rate in America when it comes to having children, that African American women or women who identify as black are more likely to die or have complications, right? This is a statistics that's kind of been out there. Now, one thing that is a subset of this information was that first generation Americans, so people who came here probably as an adult, came to America and then started their family here. So, for whatever the means may be, maybe you were a student, green card holder, you came here to America and you have a child. The statistics of the impact that they had of racism was lower than their children. So now when the next generation comes, the impact of racism is harder on them than it was on the previous generation. And it doesn't mean that the previous generation didn't have a hard time. It's just that the main factors of their difficulties are different than the main factors of the difficulties of their children. Why is this important? yes, it may be true that you come here and you don't see a problem. And maybe it's because the reason you don't see a problem is because the problems that you have overshadow some of these other conversations that are popular conversations. So your personal conversation and the popular conversation are different, right?
Okay.
So this is like me and you having a conversation, and I tell you, being a woman at night, it can be dangerous for me on a certain street.
Yeah.
Maybe you walk that street all the time.
And you're like, it's okay.
Yeah, but I'm not a 6 foot tall male with an imposing body. I know exactly how I present myself in the world.
What do you mean by imposing body?
I mean that someone might not want to fight you.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
You know,
all right,
so
right.
like myself, no one is thinking.
Please don't bloat his ego.
I'm not bloating his ego. I'm just saying that there
Just
two
checking.
things, two things can be true at the same time. So you walking down that street might be an okay experience. That would be the first generation American who's not experiencing the effects of systematic racism the same way as their child. One,
Okay.
because they're removed from the system. Your child is going through the school system, so they're
Yes.
seeing it from the school perspective, from the college perspective, from the workforce perspective, and it's layering on them on their most impactful times of their psychological and mental development. Okay, if the first time you're dealing with racism is when you're an adult who's fully confident in who they are, that's very different from someone in elementary school who can't even articulate their experience being treated poorly in the classroom and not even being able to get the resources or the support at home to overcome that experience.
Okay, good. Now, in short, register to vote.
Yes.
Figure out. There's so many votes. There's so many websites that you can go to. I think Vote 411 is one of them.
It's a great one.
Vote.org.
That's the one I was asking for. I was asking about sidebar when we were chatting. When I was asking about some information about a website or something that lists
All of
okay.
the,
Yeah.
that one. Okay,
Vote
vote for one.
Vote 411.org.
Great.
Yeah, you just need to enter your address, and it will either give you a sample ballot
Right.
or the different seats that that you're gonna be voting for. So if you can just go to vote411.org right now and check it out, it will give you your primary details.
Yes.
There's different seats. An interesting seat that I saw, on our ballot on the side of Montgomery County that I live in is the people who are going to the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
Now, this time the Democrats do not have a competitive race, and I think even the Republicans too, they no longer have a competitive race. We pretty much know who the candidates are going to be for both parties.
For the presidential.
For the presidential.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing that I saw this time on the Democratic Party is that there was, of course, the choice of you have to select the candidate that you support, and then people will vote based on that. But the interesting thing I saw, there were people who had Biden, and then there was a list of people who are uncommitted.
Right.
Yeah, and there was a very interesting demographic of the people who are uncommitted. We're going to talk about that later on, and what kind of message maybe they're trying to send.
Right.
So make sure you check the dates. There's what are the different ways of voting?
So in the state of Maryland,
Yeah.
we have a lot of great voter access. And so if you're not in the state of Maryland and you don't have multiple ways, make a plan and make it in advance. Are you going to go to the polls at 7 o'clock? Are you going to drive? Is it going to cost you extra time? Are the kids going to be together? Don't let your children be the reason why you don't vote, because you need to vote on their behalf. They can't vote, right? But in the state of Maryland, you can do a mail-in ballot. What I love about the mail-in ballots here is that if you go to one of those early voting locations, they have a box
booth.
right there that
A
you
white
can
box.
put
that
it
you can
right in
drop
there,
it
and
yeah.
it has the Maryland flag on it. We love our flag.
You can't miss it.
You cannot miss it, and you can put it right there. Make sure you sign it. Make sure you fill in everything that you need to fill in and slip it right into that box. You can also use.
How do you get the mail-in vote? The mail-in ballot.
You requested it previously. And
So at this time,
at this point in time, you either have it or you don't. So you either requested it or you did not.
Okay, so your options become two.
And that is okay. So if you did not request that, then right now, yesterday we started our early voting in person. Go to your Maryland
library
electoral
or
board,
whatever,
and they
yes.
will tell you all of the locations within your district, and you can vote at any of those locations. So let's say you live near this one voting location, but this other one is near your job. So it's more convenient to go
Yeah.
right after work and then drive home.
Correct.
You will still be able to vote at that location. This is the only time you can do that is early voting. So make sure you take an opportunity to do your early voting and look at the locations and, again, make a plan. So that's from the 2nd until the 9th
Correct.
that you have an opportunity. They always make sure that there is a weekend possible for you to do this. So if you choose to do this on a Saturday and Sunday and you have young children, this is a good time to train them up in the way you should grow and show them what that process is like. And if not, then you also have the weekends, and they open early and they close late. So 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
And to be clear, early voting is not necessarily in the same location as the people who are going to go to vote on the polling day.
Right.
It could be a different location, because I think sometimes people get
School,
confused.
a church,
Yes,
library.
that can be confusing and
Yeah.
it can be frustrating. And this is why I want everyone to just make a plan in advance. So if you go to your electoral board online, you should be able to put your address and find out what your voting location is. So in Maryland, on May 14th, you can go to one of these locations. They tend to be schools or community centers, and do your vote that way. But on May 14th, you cannot choose which place you want to go and vote. You have to go to your specific
Polling place.
polling location. And some polling locations, like where I am registered to vote, there you can go to this high school, you can go to the library, you can go to the gymnasium, and those are different districts within the same school. So
that's amazing.
it is
I've never
very,
seen
very
that.
specific. So please, please, please make sure that you look in advance. One thing that I will say about Maryland, there was a comment about the lines, and in the state of Maryland, the lines have been mitigated by the fact that that there are different ways of voting. So instead of a long line just on primary election day, a lot of people are just finding there's a little bit of congestion in the early morning hours, those who are voting before going to work, before school, and then those who are voting in the afternoon or in the evening. So the best time to go right now for early voting in the state of Maryland is during lunchtime.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. And the other interesting thing that I also noticed about the early voting, because I did vote early in the last election, and I knew that like campaign material and advertising and candidates are not allowed around the polling place on election day. But what I didn't know is that they're allowed there during early voting.
Yeah.
So I went there, and it was my first time doing early voting, and I was like, don't these guys know that they're doing something illegal? Because there was a whole horde of people who are waiting for
They're
you,
all
like
there.
scavengers,
Uh-huh.
with flyers and everything. Like they're waiting for you. I know Annette is smiling because maybe she's been one of those scavengers at some point. They're waiting for you, and they're telling you, and and I like what you said, be prepared before you go there, because don't go to make a decision when you're at the polling place. This is not like Kenya, where you're voting for member of parliament, you're voting for the president, here there's judges that you're voting for.
Right.
There's people who are going to represent you at the Democratic Convention or Republican Convention, depending on what party you belong to.
Right.
There's Board of Education. There's all these different seats. There's some states that are voting for attorney generals.
Right.
So when you have not, reviewed the list and decided on who you're going to vote for, then you'll be swayed by the loudest people.
Right.
Who
Correct,
come out
yeah.
there. Yeah, they'll come, with all kinds of flashy flyers and everything. And I found that very, very interesting, because
And sometimes
I
they
did not
could
know
sway people as well.
that.
And
They
they
do.
do. They
They
do.
do.
Yeah, they could sway people.
They do.
as
So
well.
when it comes to election, there are rules, and what you may not have noticed if you aren't keen to pay attention, which there might not be a reason for you to pay attention, is there is usually a sign, and it says electioneering. Like there's like an electioneering line. So anyone who is trying to convince people, like, this is my flyer, like this is the candidate that I'm supporting, this is why you should support them, there's a line that you cannot cross.
You cannot cross, yeah.
Right. In addition to that, if I am volunteering for a person, a political candidate, and I have, stickers or gear or something that lets you know who I am here to persuade you to vote for, I cannot go into the facility with that while people are voting. So what people do is, you put on a sweater or something like that, because that would be past the line, right? So there are rules. On election day, there are a lot more polling places than early voting sites. So let's say early voting sites, your county has, let's say 10 early voting sites. But on election day, it might be 35 to 45 different voting sites. So maybe what you experienced was that the area that you were in, there were not as many people, maybe because they decided that they want to put their volunteers in areas that might be a little bit contestable, maybe areas where there miuld be some convincing possible.
Like near the parking spaces, they were hitting you,
yes,
you know, like right when you get off the car. And then, you know, there was also this interesting, you know, like, because I've gone with my mother to at that time I'd gone with my mom to the polling place, and they saw a hijab, and the volunteer who had the hijab just made a beeline straight to us. And of course, the reason why I know this impacts what people make choices. At that point, my mom was like, "Oh, you know, like we're gonna choose her." You know, and I'm like, we don't even know if she's a candidate or she's a volunteer or whatever. But it's very
a lot of times the candidates are themselves actually
the candidates, you know, they are especially like judges, and you know, like these local elections. What people don't get is that the margins sometimes are very thin. You know, the margins are very thin. You could see an election won by 5 votes. You could see an election won by 10 votes. This happens so many multiple times, and people don't just quite understand how much of an impact you can have. Let's say like you have a family of 5, you know, like that's enough to sway you know, like a seat. So if you take some time and do some research, you could actually be doing research for something that will go back and work in your favor. Because a lot of times people are just like, oh, you know, like I'm just 1 vote, or we're 2 or 3 votes, we're not going to make a difference. When those local
seats, a lot of difference. In the Baltimore County where I am, the current executive who's running for Congress, Johnny Olszewski, he originally won by a 17 vote different margin.
Not 17,000.
17, 1-7 vote margin. And so as you know, those numbers are coming in, and this is like an area where it might be contestable, where you might have to, you know, recount and all of that. 17 votes is just not a large margin, and so every vote did count in that particular election. And now, if he were not to have made it to county executive, like the next step, would that have happened? You know, so right now, the county executive for Baltimore County is running for Congress in his district, and you know, that is something that you don't take for granted. So if you know that you only won by 17 votes in one election, you don't take for granted that you're gonna win the next election by a huge margin. So every single vote matters.
Okay. Now, you know, like talking Maryland, there was an issue about the Baltimore Bridge, you know, which was national news.
Yes.
And everyone, you know, like has something to say, because it impacted people in different ways, especially those of you, you know, like OneMic and yourself. You guys live on that side.
And have grown up with the bridge pretty much.
Yes, you know, like Omar, she's close. You know, like I'm on this other side, but this is something that was very impactful to the community. So just talking about an example of the Baltimore Bridge, maybe just talk to us about what the latest is on if it's going to be rebuilt, when it's going to be rebuilt, and how the tax dollars that you pay and the people that you choose affects the maintenance and the repair and even the rebuilding of such infrastructure. Annette.
This is such a huge, unprecedented event that has happened in our community. And first and foremost, my heart goes out to the families of the individuals who lost their lives. There were 6 individuals working overnight constructing and, you know, making repairs on the bridge on that evening. And as of right now, 5 of those individuals' remains have been discovered and recovered. And that is a great, you know, thing for the families who want to honor their loved ones. But there is one that's still missing, and I can only imagine the devastation. I do want to also acknowledge the individuals who came together so quickly and held a vigil and just came to console those family members in the community that was affected directly by the losses of those 6 individuals. When it comes to the bridge collapse itself, one, on my way over here, I was able to drive and look on the waters as I was driving, and I didn't see that bridge, and it was such a heartbreaking
It's eerie, right?
experience.
Yeah.
Yes, just to see an openness when
An
there
open
used
space
to be
where
a
there was a
bridge
landmark.
that I saw every single time. And it
That
was
reminds me of World Trade Center.
it's just such an eerie feeling. Earlier in the week, I was in the Dundalk area, Sparrows Point area, and I actually reached the last
Sparrows
exit.
Point, yeah.
Yeah, the very last exit where now it's a road closed sign and you can only go through that last exit. And that was quite an emotional experience, just trying to get to where I was going, because that was the first time I saw that, right? So this is such a huge thing for those of us who live in this area. But what's important to understand about how elections matter is, what was the response, right? Did people come together immediately? Was there information? Was there collaboration? Who collaborated? Who came out on the scene? Who was there? And that's very important, because even when you lose a loved one, the people who are there that first day, that second, you might not remember anything else. But in our culture, where people come to console with you on that first day, that second day, to just help you that first week, those people are embedded in your brain
Forever.
Correct.
you know, because that's such a it's sad that it has happened, but some people do step up. So in Baltimore, now we're talking about a regional area, so we have the Baltimore County executive, who of course was on scene immediately. We have the mayor as well, because this is connecting these two areas, Brandon Scott, who was there immediately. We also have the troopers, the police who were involved. I'm so grateful for the individuals who did their best to make sure that the road was clear, because other individuals would have been on that bridge had it not been for the police
It
closing.
was so eerie seeing those last cars move across.
That truck,
Exactly.
that
Yes.
18-wheeler.
And you had no idea what's going on when you're driving on that bridge. For me, I'm focused on getting on the other side. I am definitely not looking at what's going on in the water. And so
even if you saw it, then what? Do you jump in the water?
Exactly. It's so,
Because you're not thinking this thing is going to hit the bridge and the bridge is coming down.
yeah, because the math is a math with that,
Yes.
right? All of these years, has that ever happened?
It's never happened.
No,
yeah.
this is such
And
an
we're used to,
unprecedented
like,
thing.
if you do, like, the bridge that it's over the one, Queenstown, is it? Do you know that bridge? There's a
Queenstown.
bridge that that comes from Maryland going into, I guess, if you're on your way to Delaware.
On your way
Yes,
to
I know
Delaware,
exactly what you're
yeah.
talking about,
That's
yes.
a long
Route
bridge,
50.
yeah.
That
That one
bridge-
normally even, and it's high. It's very,
It's very
high.
high.
Those,
And that
those
one
are
is
the ones
that
where
like,
people learn how to pray who've never prayed.
is that like
that's
10?
It's
Is
a
it like
big bridge.
Yeah,
it's- Is it 5 to 10 miles? Because they normally have a walk every summer. There's a walk. They
On the
shut
bridge.
down. Yeah, they shut down one side, and
Yeah.
folks they have a walk from one side to the other. But there are
Yeah.
people who can't even cross with their vehicles there. They have folks who get paid
Yeah.
to drive
Yes.
your vehicle across.
People do not know
the
this.
Bay Bridge,
I
too.
learned this when I was on the Bay Bridge.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
and so this was a group trip,
Yeah,
and it was like,
that's the
okay,
bridge I'm
can
talking
you
about.
make
It's the Bay Bridge.
the Bay Bridge? That one, like, is if you're going to Ocean City.
Yeah.
So there's
Yes.
so
That's
Ocean-
the one you cross.
So, and there's a place, and you can make the call, and the person will come, and they'll take you across that bridge. And I've been able to drive through that bridge, but there's sometimes when they're constructing on one side, then you might have two-way traffic on
Oh,
another
yeah.
side.
Yeah, that's tricky.
And that
Especially
is-
at night.
Man, that is quite the experience. It's quite unnerving.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of these things are infrastructure, which is important to point out, because one of the things that President Joe Biden was really particular about doing during his term was an infrastructure bill, which did get passed. And so we have money that's going and allocated to different states. Interestingly enough, not bridges, but airports. Dulles Airport was getting money to expand because of the infrastructure bill.
Because of the metro, or
No, not the metro specifically, but the airport itself, expanding their terminals,
Okay.
the air
yeah,
buses.
they have a lot of traffic.
There's a lot that goes on in Dulles Airport. So Dulles Airport was allocated, I don't know the exact figure, but several $1 million for Dulles Airport. Martin State Airport, which is also in Maryland and Baltimore County, actually, which is in Baltimore County, is also getting an allocation. Texas, there's an airport in Texas that's getting an allocation for this infrastructure bill. The reason why I'm bringing this up while we're talking about the bridge is that bridge is infrastructure.
Correct.
And so there was money that was supposed to go to Maryland already, with the attempts of improving roads. And if you live in Maryland, you know these roads are always under construction, right?
Correct.
So there's
100% of the
always
time.
under construction.
Since
somehow.
before Mosh arrived,
Yo.
it's always been under construction.
83.
Yeah.
Was that to
no.
95?
Man.
To 95, when you're coming from, if you're northbound, right before you get into the city, there's always
construction.
695 always has construction.
Always.
When you're rolling from Towson,
Towson onward,
Yeah.
you know.
you're like, what the heck is going on? And then if you're headed to York, that whole 83, you're like, okay, what is going on here?
Right, and so with 695, that's where the bridge was that collapsed. So you would have taken 695 to get on that bridge. And so what happened was that we had money that was allocated, but this was then a time for us to talk about what can we do as far as emergency funding? What can we do as far as making sure that there is longevity as far as this funding is concerned? Because when it first happened, we didn't know anything. What we knew is that we needed to do something immediately. I'm so grateful that the primary concern for not only the mayor of Baltimore City, but the county executive of Baltimore County and our counterparts in Congress, as well as those in the state, was to find the individuals
Correct.
who
A
lost their
Recover the
life.
bodies, yeah.
A rescue mission.
Exactly. So
yeah,
it was a
or
rescue mission.
retrieve, yes.
And at some point it became evident that we were trying to not rescue living beings, but making sure that
recover
we're
their
able to
bodies.
recover. Yes. And so I'm grateful that was the focus. But that also required resources before papers are signed. So this is what happened. Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and friends, including PG County, decided that they were going to make sure that these efforts happened, signed for payroll before the official check had already been signed. This is significant. This means that instead of the leadership saying, let's wait and see where this money is going to come before we send divers,
They were paying them. They were like,
PG County
we're going to
said,
pay you regardless.
we're going to send divers.
Okay.
Because this is important. This is
Yeah.
life or
Correct.
death.
Yes.
And we need to do this immediately. We can figure out the accounting
Later.
later.
Also, PG County from the outside.
Yes, Angela
wow.
also Brooks actually made sure that the divers would be available. And here's the thing: these are very specialized trades. Not everybody has
not too many
divers that
people,
they can
yes.
just go and deploy, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be somebody who has these
The
resources,
training.
the human resources available immediately. And so they were deployed immediately. And it no wonder Baltimore County Executive Olszewski and also PG County Executive also Brooks have that relationship whereby they are supporting each other's campaigns, because even when they're not campaigning, there has been support between those two. That's what matters. Not only do you want to have somebody who's going to advocate for you within your district, you want somebody who is not going to be burning bridges within those colleagues that they have within the state, within the Senate, within Congress, right? So this ability to collaborate between the Baltimore City, Baltimore County, PG County, and the other areas that also sent support is very, very important.
Okay. A couple of comments were coming in here while we were having this conversation. Now, Udima Denge says that I think he was just reading what's on his ballot. There's a president, there's a governor. That's in Georgia.
Good.
President, governor, Senate, congressman, mayor, and sheriff. I think that's another important electoral seat that a lot of Kenyans don't understand. You know, like the sheriff.
Right.
You know, like, because it's not, you know, like law enforcement officers are not voted for in Kenya. So I think that's another one that I think people need to do some research.
I think because some
before-
people know the sheriff quite intimately and others do not. So if you've ever been served papers.
Yes. If you've ever been evicted,
Yes.
and don't ask me how I know about this. If you've ever been evicted, you know who the sheriff is. So that's very important to know who your sheriff is.
Are they the ones who bring that paper that is in triplicate, then it's put on the door?
It's yellow in color.
Yes,
Yes.
that one.
That's so
And
specific.
it comes
I
after
had no idea.
it comes around after the 16th, something like that.
No, it doesn't come. They give you a chance. It's normally not even after the 16th. They give, because you have to go to court first.
Right.
So a sheriff, his job is to enforce a court order.
Right.
Correct.
So, you know, the difference between the system here is that, like back in Kenya, you know, like the executive kind of still controls the police, and that's the reason why very senior government officials cannot be arrested. But here you have sheriffs who are not answerable to anyone but the electorate. They're
Correct.
elected. So when the court gives an order, doesn't matter who you are. You know, like you will, and that yellow piece of paper,
Yeah.
it's just a polite way of telling you, get the hell out of here before we get you out of here.
But I thought it's also like a demand. Say, like, if you make this payment by X, then you don't have to leave.
So those, I think that's the nitty gritty. I think that's the nitty gritty. But ultimately, they're each area has
Has its own rules.
Yeah,
Yes,
so some people
correct.
you might have 10 days, some you might have
Yes,
two,
yes, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
2
Some,
months,
yeah,
3
different,
months.
yeah, different, yeah,
Yeah.
And
different
I don't know what
places
color the
give-
papers are, but the papers are given.
Oh, trust me, I know.
But in
it's
addition
yellow.
to that,
it's yellow from.
Trust
from
me, I know the
when I
colors.
had gone into a building, I saw it was.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah, it was yellow.
Justify it.
Yeah, it was a building that I went to.
You went to,
okay,
you saw.
yeah. I
But in
don't know.
addition to that, if
Yeah.
if I decide that I'm going to sue somebody, you know, the sheriff might be
Yes.
the one who goes and
To serve.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And different areas have different rules about that. I might be able to put it in the mail, but you always have to prove that you served a person.
Yeah.
And the best way to prove it is to have the sheriff's office do it, because they're then going to file the paperwork to the courts and say, we served this person at this time, this
On day
particular
X at this place, yes.
document. Now, if you happen to live in a more rural area, that sheriff is very important, because they do
Oh, yeah.
all of this, and it's a smaller group of people. They're probably more intimately aware of who the constituents are. I live in a pretty large county district, and so I know my sheriff's name. His name is Jay Fisher. I know I'm familiar what he looks like, and you know what the officers are like. If you go into the court and have anything, even if you're just trying to get like a land deed or something, you're going to interact with the sheriffs. They're the ones who are making sure that the
Correct.
courthouse is safe.
Especially when you go to those smaller counties, you know, like when you're driving towards Ocean City,
Right.
you may drive through some of those rural counties. And some of those rural counties is where, you know, like the same person who's enforcing court orders is also the same person who might be pulling you over.
Who'll pull you
Right.
over,
So-
and
so
he's the same
sometimes-
guy who you see
Yeah.
as the prosecutor.
And
Right.
sometimes, yeah. So, and
Wow.
sometimes, you know, like they pull you over. Sometimes they'll just take you back to your dad if you're a
'Cause they
local
know you.
person,
Mhm.
because they know you.
Yeah.
You
Small
know, like
town thing.
it's a small town thing. It's a very different.
And plus, the guy may
community.
have grown up there, so it's like,
You guys
Come
know
on,
each
come on,
other.
chief.
yeah, and
Yeah.
this is one Mike's son. Ah,
Yeah.
let me take
Yeah,
him
let
back.
me just take him back home, you know, like
They
I
might
know-
even call you like, I'm here with your son.
yeah,
and
come
I
pick
guess-
him up.
Yeah.
So these are very important things to know, because I think with Kenyans, we just tend to be happy with the situations we have, and we sometimes tend to detach to some of these small details, especially in these communities that you just saw a house on Zillow and you're like, oh, this looks like a nice house, let me go live there, and you've
Kinda
not
find
researched
out.
the area and the neighborhood. So these are the small details that actually sometimes do matter. Just going through the comments, some more here. Washeke says Trump's first term set the stage for such groups to advance their agendas.
UDC, the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yeah,
this
by
was
stacking
tons of budget.
favorable judges from the local all the way to the Supreme Court. And then Udi says in Georgia they also closed the school during voting day, but I would strongly advise people not to wait
Interesting.
until voting day.
Right.
And then
Do they
Ross-
have early voting in Georgia? I didn't think they did.
I do think it was controversial, but I do think they have early voting in Georgia. Udi, please confirm for us. And then Rasvikia says, if you get confused and you're supporting Biden, just vote everyone Democrat. So easy. But then remember what you just said, Annette. There are some seats that are non-partisan.
Right.
So it will not say Republican or Democrat. So those you need to do research. Good example, Board of Education. In most jurisdictions that I've seen, it's a non-partisan seat. And then
Even the judges.
yeah, and then Udi says I should have added judges and other roles. This thing for judges. I find it, it's very weird culturally to me, and I guess this is just coming from Kenya. You know, like why are we voting for a judge? You know, like why is it that people
Yeah,
are voting for
Judge of
judges?
Appeals
And then you
Court,
know,
judge of
like
this,
in
yeah.
some of those ballot papers, there's like 5
Right.
options, and then you're told to vote for up to 4. So I'm
Right.
like, what exactly?
And if you only have 4.
Because they're circuit
Yeah.
court.
Or
they're-
sometimes you have
they're
only
circuit
4.
court
Right.
judges,
Yeah.
which are basically local to your county.
Yeah, I think
That's basically what they are.
I think there's a problem in the American voting system because I'm here, not saying I'm sophisticated, but if someone like me who's in the weeds of politics does not understand that, I'm assuming there's so many people out there
Right.
who don't know, they don't know these judges, they don't know what their role is,
Right.
and they don't know why they are voting. So they'll just vote for the name that looks nice.
Right.
With a familiar, actually, a lot of times it's the familiar name because maybe when you got your summons to come for what is it called? Not, I'm not calling them summons, but when you go in for jury duty,
Yes.
it'll be one of those guys one of those names will be the one signing or judge so and so or
Right. The
whatever.
clerk of the court.
Yeah. So you're like, oh, I remember this.
Yeah,
This.
but-
They were doing
But
it.
most people are seeing those names
For the first
for
time.
the first time.
I mean, I would say, I don't know. It depends on how interactive you are
trust
in the
me.
society, right? So if
Trust
you've gone
me.
for jury duty,
Yeah.
you've seen at least two of those names.
Yeah.
Because you have to walk past their doors or whatever, and you'll be sitting in the court with Judge X.
Okay.
This same Judge X is the one who you're going to be voting in. So if you didn't like what he did there, do not vote him in. That's a name you don't vote for out of the
But
five.
now they tell you to vote for up to 4, and then there's only 4 in the list.
But Judge,
Right.
correct.
You know
You're
which
right.
one you're not
Which means
voting for. The one
you don't have to put
So
an
you don't
X.
have to
You
put
don't
an
have
X
to
on
put
all
an
of
X to that
them,
person, right?
But yeah.
Yeah.
Now Maura Muroki says here, Brandon Scott, I think Maura Muroki loves the mayor of Baltimore City.
Must
That
be.
guy,
Oh.
he's so... he
Uh,
has... there's something, I don't know how to put it. You know?
No, he's relatable. He's a young guy. He's very relatable.
But he's human.
You know.
To some, he's DEI.
Like
He's
even the
human.
way
Duly elected incumbent, he says.
DEI.
no, but even the way he talks, he doesn't talk. You know, like politicians sometimes have a way in which have a sound. For him, he just sounds like someone who's talking to you,
They talk-
trying to solve your problem.
Politicians talk down.
Yeah. So that's the thing.
So
about
does it
Brandon
talk to
Scott.
you or does it talk at you?
It's talk with you.
Or
That-
talk
that-
with you? Does
that-
it
that
talk
was
with
the
you
question I
or
brought
talk
up.
to you?
That's the English question I brought up on my
Okay,
Facebook
sir.
page, and I realized that a lot of people don't know English. You know, because there was
So
1,001.
what does better English say?
There was 1,001 explanations I got on the difference of talking to you or talking with you. But we're gonna get to that.
Is there
later.
talking at you?
Mhm. No, talking at,
Talking
like
at you
talking
is
at
a
is
thing.
understandable.
Or
Yeah,
talking at is how you-
is a thing.
It's how you talk to
Yeah.
us.
But talking
Almost.
to you, talking with you, yeah. But anyway, we'll get to that. Now, Maura Muroki says.
yeah, I know. I have heard of I wanna rock with you. Easy to talk to you and all these things. I don't understand.
Maura says Bay Bridge is no joke when it's windy. And then I have here Udi Madenge saying the bridge was a disaster awaiting, and that's when I was in BMO 20 years ago. I don't know exactly what you mean, Udi, but tell us more.
If you're an engineer, tell us more.
And then Maura says, did they find the last work on the Bay Bridge? I don't
Not
think
yet.
they found the last
As of
worker yet.
before I came here, no.
Yeah. And then Washeke says, remember the infamous Maricopa County, Arizona
I was
sheriff?
thinking about that guy.
That's
Arpaio.
Arpaio. Yes.
That guy sumbuat people.
Yes.
What?
Sheriff of, until people of Arizona voted him out.
That guy was nasty.
Yeah. And then Udi says here, Ali, you're right. We don't know the judges we vote for. And I'll tell you anecdotally. And this is anecdotally, I'm not quoting any stats or anything. I can tell you at least 90% of the people who are walking into that polling place they're not familiar.
Udi needs to
With those
style up.
names.
He's been
Yeah.
in this country how many years? He needs to style up.
But now the question is,
Yeah.
maybe he's not interacted with the court system as much as you have.
Udi has
But-
not interacted. Let me not say.
I'm
Udi
just
has not
saying.
interacted with the
I'm
court
just
system.
saying. Anyway, later
Ask
on.
me again. Say.
Yeah. But no, real
What do you
quick.
know that we don't know?
Now, real quick.
See, I met him when we were sitting in the. Oh, sorry. Endelea.
Okay. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking about Ruto, who's coming to the White House to visit. What does it mean?
Man.
What does it mean for a president to get an official invitation? What will this mean for Kenya? We're going to be talking about it. There's, of course, a flood tragedy that's happening right now in Kenya. We're also going to talk about that. So
Incompetence.
stay tuned. But real quick,
I don't
Annette.
think it's all incompetence, but we'll talk about it.
yeah, Annette, real quick, should people vote for someone just because they're black?
They look like them.
Yeah, they look like them. Is there a point where that's justified, especially in this environment where you're getting a ballot paper that has so many positions and so many choices, is it fair to just choose someone because they're black, they look like you, and they'll take care of business for you?
She'll probably say
Yeah,
no.
I mean, like voting for Candace Owens.
Candace Owens is not on any
Wow.
ballot.
She'll probably say
chill
no
right now.
because
Okay.
Johnny O doesn't look like us. But
Johnny O does not look like us,
But
and there is
he's-
somebody who's
but
running
he's-
against him who might look like us, and I would not recommend voting for that person. What I would say is that there are layers to it. Okay, so sometimes we have individuals who are running for a position, and maybe they have very similar positions, but one looks like you, one does not look like you. I wouldn't say that that is enough. But I would also say that it's interesting that we are having this conversation because our counterparts are not having the conversation in the same way. Because for a majority of the American history, the people who have been elected, and especially into this higher positions of office, have been older white males.
Yeah.
And then we had a little bit of, older white women getting into positions. And so what I would say is that there is a shift that is happening. One, because there was once upon a time when women were not allowed to be in these positions. There was a time when people of color were not allowed to be in these positions by law. And so it is important to acknowledge the fact that there has been some shifts, and that is important. The reason why it's important is because we have this conversation, the three of us, the four of us, and we all have different perspectives, even though we look similar and we have similar experiences, right? The whole point of having these conversations is because I come in with a point of view. I'm able to interact with you guys and learn something different. My point of view might not have been changed. It may have been changed, but this is where growth happens, is in conversations like this. If there is no one having the conversation who represents a demographic that is different from what has always been there, then when will that voice actually be heard? And I don't think that our representatives lack the ability to represent or consider the concerns of the constituents who come to them that don't look like them. But there does come a point in time, and Denzel Washington talked about this when he talked about directors, right? Like, why would you have Spielberg do Schindler's List? Why would you have
That was
someone
a dumb
else?
question that person asked, but I mean, I felt kind of bad that
I mean,
That
give
question was
people
asked.
context to people
So
who don't know what you
Denzel
guys are talking about.
Washington was asked a question, and it was about, like, why would you have this particular director do this film? Why can't you have someone like Spielberg? Why can't you have someone else, right? So Spielberg has a connection to the Jewish community and therefore can tell that story better. There are Irish people who can tell their story better, right? And his example that he gave was the hot comb. So as a black woman, you would understand what it means to have a hot comb. If you grew up in a black household in America, you understand
Yes.
what that means. Not only do you understand what it means, you don't have to Google it and see the dictionary what it is. You understand the sound. You understand the smell. You understand when it's done, like Easter Sunday and all of that, right? So the cultural
The pain.
context
the grease.
through experience
All right.
is important. And there are many ways to do this. Unfortunately, some of our leadership has not chosen some of the ways that they can participate. And one of the ways you can participate is by having a diverse staff. Making sure that your staff is reflective of the constituency that you represent. Not only that, making sure that you interact with the stakeholders that exist within your constituency. So if there is a Kenyan organization, making sure that you spend time with them. If there's a, Nepalese, if it's Arab American, if it's, if your leadership is not doing that, then it makes sense to get someone that will do that because they are a part of your community, they've lived in your community, and maybe it boils down to that they look like you, but it really is those other factors that are super important.
And it's interesting you bring that up. I was in, it was a Zoom forum organized by the Muslim Forum of Montgomery County. And they were, talking to all the different, not just the Muslim candidates, but they brought together all candidates who are running for the Board of Education. And they were talking, and some very simple questions were being asked.
Mm-hmm.
And I could clearly tell some of these people who are answering these questions, they probably do not have a Muslim staffer. and that's the reason why they're answering the way they're answering. And to me, it wasn't even about the position they were giving, but it's a sensitivity, it's a lack of sensitivity in which the message came out.
Right.
And you could clearly see, man, these are votes being lost. These are votes being lost. These are votes being gained. And that's the reason why when you talk about diversity in stuff, you have to pick people who are gonna, like show you your blind spots.
Right.
Yeah. Like there's some areas where you just don't know simply because you don't know. Like there's no person who has a monopoly of knowledge. Even when you have access to, the internet and all that, you'll not be able to get to know everything. And I think that's just where some leadership falls short.
No. In addition to that, I think if you guys recall, there's a time we were really trying to look for a subject matter expert,
right,
who was a mental health expert, but was culturally sensitive.
Yes.
yes,
And took us a while to get that.
Find one, yeah.
But thanks to a war, we found Becky and Ngetich.
Yes.
You remember we had that session.
Uh-huh.
But we were specific in that we were looking for a mental health expert who was culturally sensitive, somebody who understands the African culture when it comes to mental health. Like just understanding that. And because we could have brought anyone on, but somebody who has not lived, interacted, probably even born and raised within
that community,
you cannot make it. So I think there's also that, to support Annette's point, there's also that thing of knowing, but also if you don't, like you're saying, Ali, get somebody to watch your blind spot.
Yes.
Right.
And like right now, I'll be honest with you with what's happening now within the Muslim community. We'll also shortly be talking about Gaza and how it may impact the elections in November. Within the Muslim community, I think because of the sudden impact of what has happened in Gaza and the number of people who have been killed, I'll be very honest with you, like people are voting based on someone being a Muslim. Now, there's a whole history and common set of values that we share, even with a Muslim that I just met. So I can tell you that's something that's happening. And on the Montgomery County ballot, on the people who are on the ballot for the Democratic National Convention, there's Biden, and the uncommitted list, there's 6 slots, 5 of them are Muslims. So there's something that's deliberately being done there. And even for the district, I believe it's District 6, there is a Muslim who's running, and people are actively voting for him. I think, like and I'm not saying you should vote for someone just because, or you should vote. But then I think with what Annette explained, especially when it comes to the black part, so with people like us, it's complicated because we do have our black identity, we do have our African identity, and we also have our Muslim identity, which we now have to straddle back and forth, like all the time when we're making all these decisions. But it's one of those things is that you have to make sure that this person is aligned with your values, because sometimes you could have someone from the same community, but they're not necessarily aligned with your values. There was someone who Mike mentioned earlier on, Candace Owens. Some people feel like she's not aligned with the values of the black community, so maybe they would vote for her, maybe not.
Hell no.
Well, fortunately, she's not on any ballots right now.
She's not on any ballots, yes.
And neither is she being invited to the cookout.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, but what I can say, and that is an important point to say. What I can say is that we have to look at our candidates not just based off of what is going on in the current news cycle, but many of these upper ballots are people who have been in positions before. So what did they do before, right? So, for example, in my district, Johnny Olszewski is running for Congress, and he's running to replace Dutch Ruppersberger, who is retiring. And we do have many people who are retiring. This is a trend that we're seeing with some of our older elected officials. So what has he done prior to deciding that he wants to run for Congress? You know, where was he before? He was in the Maryland state delegate position at one point in time. He is currently the county executive. As the county executive, he established the new the Immigration Affairs Office, and then from that we have the New Americans Task Force, which I happen to be a part of. These are things and initiatives that he did before I, as Annette Karanja, got involved in the county government. Because of these decisions, the Kenyan American community within Baltimore County had an opportunity to interact with him on a different type of level. And now if you find our, and I'm very proud to show here, if you find our Welcoming and Belonging strategic plan, which was released by the task force, when you look inside, you're gonna find a picture of Johnny Olszewski with some Kenyans, children here. This is from an event that happened years prior to that office being established. That is significant, which means that the interest and the desire to come and interact with our community happened before there was even an Immigration Affairs Office. And then you continue and you see that there are nonprofits that are featured here that are run by Kenyans, more than one. And then you'll also see numbers based off of the feedback that Kenyan Americans were having. And it's not just us. Arab Americans, Nepalese Americans, different organizations put in their input into this strategic plan, right? So this isn't just about Kenyans. This is about someone being interested and showing their interest in the diversity of the county that they represent. That is a reason why I can get behind this person, because even before Annette Karanja came to the scene, he was doing the work to connect with the community that I am a part of. And I appreciate that because it is genuine. There are some people who, in contrast, might decide that now that they're running, all of a sudden you see them in your church, all of a sudden you see them at your organization and at the cookout.
Yeah.
You've never seen them before.
You've never seen them before.
And you might never see them again. Look at the track record, and don't just look in the last news cycle. Look what happened last year if they were an elected official. What were they doing and how did it impact your community? It's a very important thing to strategy when it comes to researching.
And interesting, you talk about Johnny O. I'm not in his district, but I'm a Kenyan who's interacted with him. We've actually interviewed him here, but I challenge you, Annette, to get him to the studio before he gets to Congress,
right?
Because I believe he's going to win. And then also just explain to the people who live in Baltimore. I can see some Baltimore people have logged in here. I can see Angie is in the building. What parts of Baltimore, because this district sometimes are confusing, and apologies to the people from out of state, but this is for the benefit of people of Baltimore.
Right.
What familiar names in Baltimore are in this? What district number is it?
So we're talking about
where Johnny O is running.
2. So
District 2.
So if you remember Dutch Rupersberger,
yeah,
that's who we're talking about. We're talking about Baltimore County and part of some of like the northern western. That's the part that I'm least associated with. Is that there's a little part that most Kenyans are not in. That's a little bit northern western to us.
But what the parts
so
that most Kenyans are?
Where Kenyans are, where Charlie Brown is. So if you've ever gotten
what's the name of the
that's
area?
Rosedale area, Hamilton area.
Rosedale,
if you're from Essex
Rosedale.
area, if you're
Okay.
in Towson,
Okay.
Towson area, this that's what we're talking about. That's what we're encompassing here,
Okay.
and also the western parts of Baltimore County. And so this is important to know. At some point in time, you now have like Kwesi and Fume, which people are familiar with. That's a different district.
That's a different district.
You know, but it is important to have relationships within Congress, within the state of Maryland, where it's going to be.
Carl Jackson is in what district?
Carl Jackson is on the state level, and he's in District 8. So
District 8, okay.
this is
So he's a state delegate.
Those of you who do not come from the state of Maryland, I think this conversation is still important to you, because this is telling you the strategies of how to understand your districts, right? So you live in a place, maybe it's a municipality, maybe it is a city and therefore has a mayor, maybe it is a county and therefore has a county
Executive. Yeah.
and maybe there is another format that's there, but those are the main ones, right? And then so that those people who are there basically running the business of that particular area.
The
That's
day-to-day.
local.
Yeah.
That's local. That's your streets. That's your local ordinances. That's where that is. Then on the state level, it means you have a representative. This representative is taking care, is going to be dealing with every other district in the state and trying to deal with the funding. The goal is usually the budget of the state, right? And the policies are then influenced by making sure that we have a budget to actually implement these policies. And then we have federal. That's what most people are familiar with. We have US Congress, there's the House of Representatives, and then we also have the US Senate. A lot of people are familiar. Every state gets 2 senators, but depending on the population and districting, the state will get a different allotted number of Congress people.
House of Representatives.
And that is going to be in the House of Representatives. And so each district is delineated that way.
Okay.
Maryland is interesting because we do have a lot of Democrats within Congress, but we do have some states that are consistently red, that are consistently Republican. We do have Republican
some districts. Okay, yeah, and it was also interesting for me to find out that there's some states that are so small that they just have one congressional at-large representative, and I think Delaware might be one of those states. I think maybe some of these tiny states, they just have one representative, you know, like out in, so they have more senators than actually they have people in the House of Representatives.
Right. So a lot of times these state politicians, the ones who end up in their state houses, then end up in Congress, or they make that journey, or maybe we've had governors who have become presidents. If you can think about that, like in Texas, we've had governors who are,
Bill
Texas,
Clinton is an example.
And then so on and so forth. So these down ballots,
George Bush Jr.
They're not small. They are steps, and they have implications for the future. So, you have the opportunity to see but the fact that someone does well in one seat doesn't mean that they're going to do well in another seat, but they are stepping stones for some of these more like career politicians. I don't absolutely love the word career politicians because no one else is criticized for having a career that grows. Like that's the natural thing if you were working in the tech industry that you would do. But who is doing the work, and do your constituents see that you're doing the work and reward you for doing the work? Right now we have the senatorial race here in Maryland, and so on the Democratic side we have David Trone, who is running. He currently is in U.S. Congress representing his district.
6, my district.
That's your district.
We've never even seen him. Very aloof person, very difficult to find.
Very interesting.
Very, very aloof. Like the previous representatives we've had, you would see them. You would see, like, even within like a shopping center, like there was a time when the area was living in was being represented by Van Hollen, who's a current,
senator,
who's a current senator for Maryland. Like he was someone who was very responsive. You would see him come to activities.
Right.
But Tron, he's only been feasting on my social media feeds. He's omnipresent.
Yes.
Everywhere I go, Instagram, David Tron. Facebook, David Tron.
But he has money.
He does.
I know. He's everywhere.
So
it's that totally wine-ring money.
Total Wine, yes, is a multi-billion-dollar company, and so he's self-funding, which means he has the opportunity to flood the airways with his message and with his campaign. I didn't know that experience. So for those of you who are listening, I've never heard Ali say this about his experience with Trump within his just. I've never heard you say that. But what I will say is it's very concerning to me that we have individuals who are using having money is good. I hope to have lots of money too one day, right? But using that money just to, it's like McDonald's. McDonald's will have so many ads to a point where I might think I might want to go and get McDonald's. But let me tell you something. No shade to the company. Please don't come for me. I do not like McDonald's at all, right? But just seeing it over and over and over again might make me think. It has an impact, right? It might make me think, you know what, it's late night. They have a 24-hour drive-through. I might want to go.
It's marketing 101.
It really is, right?
But the milkshake is really nice.
And I use those.
You're telling me?
They have a good mango pineapple smoothie.
No, try the strawberry one. The strawberry one. That's amazing.
The milkshake brings all the.
This is not an ad. By
the way, before I forget, we are also boycotting McDonald's. That's one of the companies.
Okay, so so there are a list of companies that are being boycotted. I think that's very interesting.
People who are wearing this.
We'll talk
so
about it.
That also includes you. You should. If you're not, you should be.
And I have to use my points. What are you talking about?
Oh my goodness. So here's the thing about the money portion of it. I think there's a couple of ways that we can look at it. Yes, it's good for you to use your money and to fund it. And one of the things that Trone's campaign has said is that when we talk about battlegrounds, and I know I'm introducing a concept here, like when we talk about battlegrounds, it could go Republican, it could go Democrat, it could go this way or that way. You know, what happens is the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they're going to use whether it's their super PACs or, you know, big donors, things like that, to pay for these campaigns so that other people can get familiar with the candidate. Now, Trone is saying the Democratic Party doesn't have to worry about me. So go focus somewhere else, put your funds somewhere else. And that is actually a really powerful statement. It's saying, you know what? We don't want to lose control of the House. We don't want to lose control of the Senate, or we want to gain it. We don't want we don't want the other side to gain it, whichever the argument is. He's saying, you know what? I have my own funding. I don't need to have small donors. I don't need to have, you know, Democratic donors or super PACs influence my race because I have my own money to do it. However, when you look at the other side, we have Angela Brooks. She is the county executive for PG County. And one of the reasons why I support her is because I met her prior to knowing who she was on a one-on-one level as a person. And what was amazing about this interaction with her is that we were talking about issues that affect someone like myself, who is, you know, a younger adult individuals who has concerns about taxes, who has concerns about the school districts that children are going to, who has concerns about safety. And we're having this conversation. And at the end, oh, by the way, I am the county executive of Prince George's County.
Oh, interesting.
And when I informed her about my concerns or the advocacy work at the time, which was so infantile, before I was getting, you know, reoccurring invitations to this show, like at that infancy of this advocacy work that I've been doing for Kenyan Americans, when I told her about that, she said, oh, let me connect you with our African diaspora board. Like, I want you to talk to this, you know. So she gave me information of her chief of staff at the time and connected me on that and said, let's talk, because we have a large African diaspora here. I don't know if your particular group is being represented proportionately. Like, let's find out what that looks like and how we can engage you. I personally do not live in Prince George's County. Mm-hmm. I was so amazed by her willingness to connect with me, to make the part that is actually usually hard, she was offering to make it easy. You know, so I can call you and say, you know, let's get some people from your area. Let's get some people from your area. You know, that's my hard task to do. Mm-hmm. But the more challenging part now is to get the executives involved if they're not interested. But she was interested, right? So I'm talking about a genuine conversation I had with this woman long before the seat was even open, long before I knew that she was going to run for it. And so fast forward, what has happened is that I have continued to see, and this is why I said, don't just look at the current news cycle. I have continued to see her interaction with the immigrant community within Prince George's County. Baltimore County has a huge immigrant population. Prince George's County has a huge immigrant population. And you know, Maryland in general is just super unique because of the diversity that is here. And so you have a choice of either acknowledging that or not, you know. And so I really did appreciate that. I've never spoken to Trone prior to his Senate race. That has not been my experience, and I don't necessarily hold that against him, because there might not be a reason for us to connect naturally, given that I'm in such a different district than him. Yeah. However, once I have interacted with him, I did get to meet some of his staff members, and while it was great that they were able to come to us, I just know that he was able to afford to come to us, and I don't know, he was able to afford to send people because he has like a payroll, right? So people are being paid. So he has a lot of money. Sit down, come to sit down with me. Whereas on the Also Brooks team, in addition to my personal interactions with her, some of the people who are reaching out to me are volunteers and people who know, like, hey, we know that you're a part of this organization. We know you're part of this community. How can we connect? How can we connect with your voters? Okay. And so she gets my endorsement for those reasons.
Angela Also Brooks. So now here's an interesting part. there's a race between Also Brooks and David Tron for the Maryland Senate. Now, the Maryland seat has never been known to be a toss-up seat,
Right.
but there's a complication of our former governor, who was a Republican,
Right.
Larry Hogan, very popular Republican governor in Maryland,
Right.
who decided to run for Senate. How does this complicate the race in November? And I know you support Also Brooks, but what are polls showing currently on a head-to-head between Also Brooks versus Hogan and Also Brooks versus David Tron? I mean, who looks like the stronger candidate between the two? Because this has a senatorial race has national implications.
Right.
This could flip the control of the Senate from Democrats back to Republicans.
Right. It's super significant. So the polling right now, because we are still in the process of doing our primary, which started yesterday, is only between what would be between the Republican candidates and between the Democratic candidates.
Yeah.
There is some what I would call soft polling, meaning that inquiries, but not hard inquiries, about what it would look Tron versus Hogan, Also Brooks versus Hogan. But just to educate some of our listeners, after the primary, each party then supports the person that
won the primary.
Yes, the
Okay.
one that was elected, which means right now Tron is not getting, Maryland Democrat money or National Democrat money, and neither is Also Brooks. They're doing their own fundraising up until this point, and this is pretty typical practice when it comes to these things. Once somebody wins, then the funding nationally starts coming
DNC takes
in in a very, very significant way. And this becomes an effort from the entire party, locally, state level, and nationally. This was not a toss-up state. We knew that whoever was going to win was going to be a Democrat. When Hogan entered the chat, then it was an issue because he did have some Democrat support. It is not often where you have someone from one party getting a lot of support from the opposing party.
Yeah.
Hogan did have some of that support, and so that is a thing of concern. And he is being supported by donors from out of state, specifically Mitch McConnell. This is a conversation that's happening. We want Hogan to run because we think that you have a good shot at winning, and I don't think that is a false statement. I think it is a true statement that he has a shot.
So it's something that we have to be concerned, because I think currently, according to the Cook Political Report, it's important for people to know, like, the Senate is a different beast. They don't have it has a 6-year term. Every 2 years, about a third of the seats are up for re-election. So about 33 seats are always up for re-election. Most of these seats in the Senate are either Republican or Democrat. Now, as we speak currently, I think the balance of power is Democrat is 51, including the independents who caucus with them, and Republicans are 49. So it's a very thin margin. Now, on the races that are coming up, there's only 3 seats that are rated as a toss-up. Actually, 4. Arizona is one of them, which is an open seat, and then Montana has Tester, as a senator. Nevada has Rosen as a senator, and then Ohio has Brown as a senator. So those are the only 4. Those are the 4 seats that will determine the balance of power in the Senate, come November. Remember, if Trump, let's say, for example, if Trump wins election, the only protection, the people who don't like Trump, because I'm here not making assumptions anymore, I came to understand there's quite a number of Kenyans who love Trump.
Kenyans were here, or Kenyans in Kenya?
Both over here and also in Kenya.
Yeah, and quite a number in Baltimore.
Yeah,
might be another guy's relas. The ones he always talks about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that, so for the people who do not like Trump, which is quite a number of people, the only protection that we're gonna have in case Trump wins is gonna be the Senate. So if this protection goes, then you're cooked. For lack of a better way of saying this. And now, with this complication that Larry Hogan has added to Maryland, bringing it into the conversation of being a toss-up state, it makes this coming election even much more important. Based on association with you, Annette, I am going to vote for also Brooks. I'm hoping, like the rest of the people here in the studio, based on the association, because we trust you. You are our trusted source for local politics.
And I don't take that lightly. Thank you so much. What I would say about Hogan, and I do know many people who did vote for him, being a governor is not the same as being in the Senate. One thing that I will say about his campaign is, one, he had great PR during his time. As a person who is from Baltimore and has heard him say negative things about Baltimore, that's just one strike against him, because I love my city. I love where I'm from. I love the Baltimore metropolitan area. And so that's something that's very important to me. But another thing about Hogan is that there are some bills that he has signed and some things that he had vetoed that would have positively impacted minority communities, and that is something that's worrisome and troublesome to me. But let's to be very specific in a very vague way, I don't know what his party platform is right now. He has not released any statements and has chosen not to answer questions, whether it be about abortion, whether it be about actually anything. He has not.
Is he running
answered.
as a Republican or as an independent?
He's running as a Republican.
Okay.
He is a Republican, and there is this idea that he is, more bipartisan, or he's more. Yes, he's anti-Trump. That does not make him any less Republican. So a lot of those values that we understand to be a part of that are the values that he carries. He has not talked about some of the more divisive issues publicly, and as of right now, he doesn't have to. The work does not need to be done leading up until November, which I completely understand. But please do understand that when November comes around, that hopefully by then we'll know what his party platform is and what he's saying. But he has actually been handpicked by other Republicans who want to make sure that there is a Senate majority.
Okay, all right. So
AKA disrupting.
So that's quite interesting. The other races that I'm trying to find a report that I got from Cook Political Report, which shows that in the House of Representatives, there's about 22 competitive seats.
Number was larger than that.
Yeah, there's about 22 competitive seats, and those are also interesting seats to look at. I mean, in the House, there's a bit, because there's so many representatives in the House. It's a bit difficult to go through all of them name by name. But yeah, there's 22, and I think right now the Democrats have around 202 safe seats, and this is just me guessing. The Republicans have around 210 safe seats. There's 22 seats that are toss-up. The magic number is 218. You need to have 218 to be a majority.
Right.
So between those 22, depending on how those 22 will go, this could go either way. So you have to pay attention. You have some representatives who are being fought very hard right now by Republicans, namely there's AOC, of course,
right.
And then there's also Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar.
Thanks to AIPAC.
Ilhan Omar, I saw an ad for her, and this is the first time that I've seen an ad for her, trying to fundraise. And money is a big part of this, because that's how they're able to get the information out. If someone asks, what does this person even represent? Like, what is their... Some people are actually going to Google and look and see what those things are. Some people are going to wait until they see what they get in the mail, but that costs money. I don't know if you know how much a stamp costs. It used to cost a couple cents. And now, it adds up. And 44. So to be able... Is that what it is?
I think it is what it is.
Yeah,
well, I don't even.
So it costs a lot of money to run a campaign.
So I don't even know that when you're doing bulk, you might get a little bit of discount, but you still have to now pay the person who prepares all of that. So there's a financial component when it comes to mailing out these letters, just to get the information out so someone can make an informed decision on whether they want to vote for you or not vote for you.
So I think that's
finances are super important on that, and that's why we're seeing that. When it comes to they're flooding money, what they're saying is that You can't get on Instagram or Facebook or, you know, anything like that without seeing somebody's face telling you should vote for them.
Yeah.
I would just encourage people to do just a little bit more research, but understand that the goal is this. The people who are making decisions about whether or not we are expanding funding for some of these programs that affect your taxes, some of these programs that affect internet access right now at the end of the month, if Congress doesn't do something, the program, the Affordable Connectivity Program, is set to expire. And if there is no extension of the finances, that means millions of Americans are not going to have access to the internet. So I don't think we have a show if there isn't internet access for our listeners.
Correct.
Now imagine if somebody is listening and getting their information from this show, but they have to make a choice whether they're going to pay BG&E, they have to pay, you know, internet at one point in time was a luxury. So you've been managing your bills up until this point, but now your kid comes home and they have to do homework and it has to be done online.
And you don't have the internet.
Or they have to do research, you know, or you don't have a local library that is close enough. I had the privilege of being able to go to the library. I had internet. I was very privileged. I had internet at home, but I also could go to the library and ask a librarian to help me do research. Some people don't have that. All they have is you know, whatever is provided at home. If that program ends, there is a report that went out earlier this month that said that it will actually cause the loss of lives, because some people make the decision of whether or not they're going to make the journey to a hospital or to a healthcare facility based off of making a search to see, are these symptoms up to the level of getting medical care. And some people will just not go if they don't have that information. And most of us, if we take medicine, you'll see the warnings. If this causes you to have shortness of breath, then go to see a medical professional immediately. If you have an allergic reaction, do this, do that, do that.
You have hallucinations.
Now imagine you don't have the ability to look it up and see, like, oh no, I'm having these symptoms. I can't look it up. So there is actually a correlation between internet access and mortality rate. And we live in a country where many of us are living in these cities areas, but there are areas whereby you might have to drive an hour and a half
to
before
get services,
you get some sort of civilization, let alone a hospital.
Yeah. And shout out to OneDem99. I see he's been very active out there on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in. OneDem99
from Florida.
Thank you.
New listener.
I think he's, I don't know whether that's one dem is for Democrat, or is that dem like that Jamaican?
One dem.
Galdem skilaki.
One dem 99.
Yeah, so I don't know, whichever it is, but OneDem99, interesting name. Thank you so much for tuning in. We had Yaudi, who was earlier saying county executive is in Towson. I am a former resident of Baltimore County, Rosedale to the core, home of the wire. And then there's a listener, Jawara Mary Rose. He's telling Omosh Fire looking good. Okay, I think.
What's up, Jawara?
Yeah. I think
Jawara is my boy. Jawara is, oh, wow. Jawara, why am I forgetting where you're from? Let him say where he's from.
Okay, no, but the last name is Mary Rose.
Panama.
Mary Rose doesn't sound like
Mary Rose. It's one. You just say it as is.
Maria Rose in Kiswahili.
He's from Panama.
Oh, he's from Panama.
Yes, but he's I guess.
Okay, hello,
is it
Panama.
Panamanian American, is that how you would say it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Omosh, Udi said over here, Omosh, I have as many court cases like Tupac, but I can tell you that I don't know any of the judges' names.
There you go. And Udi is a representation.
So he went to court, but he
people.
doesn't know the judge's name. Like if it came up on a piece of paper, he wouldn't know.
No, but he's talking about the actual piece of paper he has.
But that's an experience that many people have. So if I go and you know,
then we're different.
I mean, it could be probate court. You're trying to fight that you know your inheritance is your inheritance, and the person who's magistrate or the judge who's overseeing.
Yes.
You don't know this person. If you have a lawyer who practices regularly in your area, they'll tell you like, oh, this judge, I don't know, this judge might not be very favorable to you because of XYZ cases that I've seen before with him or her. And then you might have one where it's like, okay, this person is fair. this person has been favorable. I've been in court with them before, so at least we got a good judge. At least we got, those things actually matter.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the expert on
Correct.
every single judge.
No, I didn't
But
say- yeah,
what
I
we
didn't
need though in our community and what I would challenge
What do we need?
more lawyers.
We don't have
No.
No,
Yeah.
not immigration lawyers, not
no,
lawyers who just
no.
do one thing. We need to have
You know-
more
Just
lawyers.
lawyers.
We
but,
need-
but you know why? I think I know why we don't have that many lawyers. And this is just my own theory and my hypothesis. It's very expensive to go to law school, and the fact that law is a second degree.
yes.
For a lot of first generation immigrants, men, ain't no time for that.
I wouldn't say first generation immigrants, because I know many immigrants who are lawyers. But I don't know what the Kenyan reason is for it. But let me tell you, the Caribbean,
I think it's
they are
expense.
holding it down.
I think
The
it's the
amount
expense.
of
I think it's the
Haitian,
expense.
the amount of Haitian Americans that I know who are
But,
lawyers.
but when you talk
But
about Haitian Americans,
They're
are you
ahead of
talking-
us. They're actually ahead of
in
us
terms
in
of
terms
they've been
of
here
how,
longer.
how
yeah, that's true.
They've been here longer than us.
So-
So I think even as Kenyans,
even with Nigerians,
as we
you know.
get here longer, because I think Kenya, we are still very heavy first generation. I mean, the numbers are now balancing out, but we're still very heavy first generation. It's very difficult for someone who came here as an adult to go even those who've attempted law school is something that I was personally very interested in. So one of the reasons why I just struck it out of my list, when I discovered that you first need a degree
Right.
to go to law school, I was like, this is out. I'm not going to do
Okay,
this.
but that can only be an excuse for so long, and I just won't accept it, because we're now in the information age, right? So there are people who came
That's
like my parents.
That's why they're doing information technology.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, but the ones who came here, they did the best they could, and I'm
Correct.
so grateful.
Yes.
I'm so grateful.
So
They
this
laid
next
the
generation,
foundation.
yeah.
Yeah, but when we say next generation, it's mixed now, because you're still talking about people who are coming here for the first time to join their family. And then we're also talking about people who had children and now are growing up here. And so what we have access to is different. But if I were to make that same argument in this conversation and say that, Kenya has been around for only 50 plus years, for 60 years, and so therefore you cannot expect it to do XYZ thing compared to another country. Yes, that is true when it comes to systems and certain things. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't have roads. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have some basic things. And in this country, basic things, teachers, healthcare, lawyers, accountants, and we have done the others, right? But when it comes to law, we've only focused on, or at least the conversation has been, immigration law. I know Kenyan lawyers who will tell you whenever they talk to another Kenyan, the only thing they want to talk to them about is accounting.
immigration.
And, is immigration, but they don't realize that I do taxes, that I do tax fraud, or they don't realize that I am, in the estate planning sector, or I do private equity or something like that. There are different things that you can do within
Bankruptcy is another
You
one.
know, I
bankruptcy is huge.
That one is huge.
I hear
Folks
what
just
you're
don't know
saying,
about it.
Annette. I hear what you're saying, Annette, but I'm also looking, and the reason why I talk of, not necessarily the next generation, but at least people who've gone through high school over here, because I know a lot of people who are in my predicament who wanted to do law, and you're self-funded.
Right.
On paper, it's easy, because I really that was that was my first love. I really wanted to do it, but then when you first of all not only look at the fact that you have to, it's a second degree, and then when you look at also the cost of going to law school. Now this other cohort that's coming that at least spent high school at the bare minimum, I think those ones have no excuse. I think we should encourage people to do it, and we should even kids who are very talented, we should rally around them so that we have specific people in we start having a number of people in those professions, so that those who understand the community, so that they can come out and also help us. We need to look at the long game.
Yes, every problem that you have mentioned is an opportunity for a solution. So as long as we're not staying, and this is the reason why, it's it goes from being excused to being an opportunity, right? So let's talk about the opportunity part. Let's rally around people. one of the things we're talking about are the people that you vote for. The people that you vote for on the state level, we have scholarships that you can get from your district. So if your student goes to, I mean, if you have a student that is graduating from high school, they can apply for these scholarships. And sometimes the people who apply, there are very few people, you know, and so which means that the percentage of you being able to win or be awarded a scholarship would be high if there are not so many people in the pool. You're not competing against everyone in America. You're competing against the people within your smaller locale or your district. So that's one thing. We're voting for people who are also, you know, even on the congressional side, there are also congressional scholarships and things like that. There are internships that you can do. And these are the things that build the opportunities for you to have the schooling funded and also understand what resources are available. If you're coming here on a student visa, there's so many things that were not available to you, and that is true. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Yeah. But your children are having different experiences. Yeah, and correct. So
we should be open to
we should be open to it. We should encourage
Does FAFSA pay for law school?
I actually don't know the answer to that question.
I think FAFSA pays for bachelor's for first degree. I don't think I'm not sure if there's been any changes.
I'm not an expert on that. I will not speak to that. But I do know that there are fellowships. I do know that there are universities
fellowships, grants,
that
all sorts of different things. Yes.
And for example, like within Maryland, the people that I know who have degrees, who have law degrees, there are people who got accepted to different programs, but were able to get more funding for example, University of Baltimore, or maybe it was Towson University, or, you know, depending on that. And so those are things that with time you're going to get to know, but we have to also decide that it's important for us to know. So back to the reason why I say we need to have more lawyers, because lawyers are the ones who are interacting with these judges, and lawyers are the ones who end up becoming judges ultimately. So
but a lot of them also go into politics.
Long game.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Now lawyers are long game.
Yes, and so here's the thing: you want to
look at the long game.
We need to know. We need to be in these rooms and be a part of this environment. I cannot be an expert on everything. I cannot speak on judges. When I am asking about judges, I ask my lawyer friends, "What is your experience with this person?" And how do you think that this would in fact impact the community?
Washeke here says one of the things that prevent us from going to some careers is black tax. We want to be able to earn money quickly so you can support family back home. Our kids are not going to be in that issue, so the world is an oyster. And she further says that deters many from selecting careers that require several years of education before one can earn. So now, just pivoting to something different as we come to a close, of course, we're going to talk about Ruto's upcoming visit to the White House and the flood tragedy in Kenya. Now, last time you were here, Annette, it was back on the 20th of October. That was last year. Israel had just declared war on Hamas, and we had 4,000 people dead at the time. And we were actually already talking about the war that had just started. You will remember the time, very early in the war, I categorically said that Biden will lose almost all Muslim support. As of today, that number of the people dead has gone up from 4,000 when we were talking at that time to over 35,000, and we've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of protests across the world. Now, more recently, students have set up camp in college campuses across the U.S. in solidarity with Palestine, and they're demanding a ceasefire now. Now, as we continue this conversation on elections 2024, maybe tell us what you think, what has shifted in the presidential calculus this coming November following this war. From the last time when we spoke, when I said my gut feeling, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing is that the Muslim community has completely divorced from Joe Biden. Is there anything, you know, like based on what I said at that time or based on what you were seeing that went against your expectation or that you saw that has shifted very differently within the presidential race? Annette?
I will say that this is a very unique time when it comes to this presidential race, because conflict when it comes to Israel and Palestine has been continuing on for a long time. This is something that has been brought to the forefront because of the huge devastation. And of those numbers that you're talking about, we're talking about 70% of individuals who have died being women and children.
Yes.
And because I am a woman and because I have children or have a relationship with the greater Kenyan community children that exist within my world, that is very devastating to me to hear about it in terms of those numbers. So what has happened is that there are ongoing conversations that happen, and sometimes they do not take on the media coverage as much as I personally would like, because I want to know what's going on in the mind of the president and what's going on that side and the executive office when it comes to this. I do know that there have been times when Biden has had to address these concerns and has said, have patience with me. I'm working on it. And my understanding is that behind the scenes, there are efforts that are being made to have conversations when it comes to the diplomatic side. But is that enough? Most people don't want to have quiet conversations behind closed doors and not understand what that is, and then just hope one day that that is going to have a certain ramification. And I think we need to be specific about what it is that is wanted by the greater community. Those who are upset with the Biden administration are upset about the killing of women and children. People who are not Hamas. Hamas is an entity, it's an organization, and then there are the people who are living on that land, and there is a distinct difference. Do we want to support an organization that is using terror and hiding behind individuals in order to get their point across? I don't think so. I think most people can say that we do not appreciate the tactics that Hamas used to get attention. However, that is a different conversation from what is happening as retaliation. And in this situation, the retaliation is primarily affecting people who do not identify as Hamas. And we only know that because the numbers that you're saying, we're talking about 35,000 people. Those 35,000 people are not operatives of this organization that was responsible for October 7th. That is very important to note. Unfortunately, there are a lot of emotions involved. I am in a county that has a diversity whereby we do have a Muslim population that is present and very well seen. And we also have a very large Jewish population at the same time. And so this is something that I am glad that conversations were happening between multiple communities prior to this event happening in Baltimore County, which means I have the luxury of having conversations with individuals from the Jewish community and individuals from the Muslim community at the same time. And one thing that I know is universally understood is that we want peace. How we go about that moving forward is what is truly disagreed upon. So we're talking about schools having encampments, right? We're talking about divesting. What is divesting even? And is that even something that is feasible? Because the pushback that these universities are saying is that this is not possible. But what I know from history is that the same thing happened when it came to the South African apartheid. And during that time, there were universities that were investing in companies that were benefiting from the apartheid state in South Africa. And so the protest method that was used is the same as far as protesting so that they divest. And that divestment actually had an impact on what happened in South Africa when it comes to what money was, supporting the apartheid state. Mm-hmm. Another example would happen to be when we're talking about the formalized group, the KKK formalized group actually was bankrupted. And they were bankrupted not because of student encampments or divesting in that way, but from the monetary ramifications of someone taking them to court and suing and getting damages done. And that is how that particular organization had to be dismantled. Now, the history of what happened after the fact is not that the KKK is gone, it's just that the formal organization no longer exists in the same way that it did when it was first created. And so we're talking about money. We're talking about, boycotting certain companies. So you're saying people are boycotting McDonald's. I know people were boycotting
Coca-Cola.
Starbucks was affected enough that the leadership made statements to kind of retract what they had said before. And they were saying, they went from being, we're pro-Israel and this is where we stand and we're not, open to hearing other sides, to then having an argument of, what we really want is peace. What we really want is, so it shifted the tone. Is that enough for people, That's for people to decide. But what they're really saying is that this boycott has had enough of an economic impact that we're seeing this as executives, and we need to change the tone of what we're saying. I really wonder if we had Elijah Cummings, what that would look like, because he is the master of the good trouble. Like we're getting in good trouble. And what does that mean? It means that you're standing up for something that whenever there has been a protest, there has been pushback. And whenever there has been a protest, what the protest is about has always been miscommunicated. Like, do people know what's happening beyond, what CNN is saying, beyond what Fox News is saying? Like, who's actually sitting down and understanding what the conversation is about and what is being protested?
Yeah, so this conflict, like with the sadness of the death of over 35,000 people, it came with a lot of lessons and a lot of points to learn. And I talk this, like from within the community.
Right.
And just trying to also logically understand, like what's happening. Does what we're doing make sense? Does it serve our interest to just totally go against Joe Biden? What's the alternative on the other side? And where, like I'm a card-carrying Democrat, where I found it so difficult to even go back to the community and try to explain to them that, this and this might, that's at a personal level, is just based on the fact, first of all, like this is the first TikTok live genocide that has been broadcast to the world in slow motion. Then there's of course the aspect of Hamas attacking and everything, and that's understandable. Like when you get attacked, you'll want to retaliate. But when we look at the tactics that have been used in the retaliation, whereby Israel wants to use food, starvation as a weapon of war, which is not being reported by Hamas. It's being reported by the people who are trying to provide food, the organizations that are trying to provide food to the Palestinians.
Yeah, this conflict has actually caused the highest deaths in nonprofit organization individuals, volunteers.
Yes.
In any conflict in recent history, which is very disturbing to me because I know people who are part of Doctors Without Borders who have been, whether they are affiliated with the United Nations, who have gone into areas just to provide sometimes medical, sometimes food, and they have had some level of protection, even though they're going into these respect, even though they're going into these dangerous areas. So this is now going to have ramifications. Are we going to have people willing to volunteer to go into these situations if we know that your life is at risk to this extent? And this has implications beyond just Palestine. This is going to be ramifications within the world. We're going to have human resources issues because of this.
So I think, when I try to think, like from Biden's point of view, unfortunate for him, he's the one who, was holding the purse and is also holding, the ability of allowing, weapons to go in and come out. So he's the one who's on the driver's seat. And then there's this logic that, and it's understandable, I don't know how Trump would have dealt with this, but I know it would have been worse. But then the problem is right now we have someone on the driver's seat. Like when you're on the driver's seat and you're driving the car into a ditch, like the passengers will be like, this is the driver who deliberately drove us into a ditch when he had the opportunity of steering back the vehicle, but he chose not to do that. And that's how this is being perceived. You're the one who's signing all this money that's still financing these weapons that are killing. It's weird that you're sending money to, you're sending the weapons, and at the same time, You're also sending the food, and these people you're sending the weapons to are the ones who are blocking food from getting to these people. So it's a very weird quagmire that's going on in there. And like I said earlier, I'm a bit, let me not even use the word worried, because at this point, because that's the direction Biden has chosen to take, I think he has to live with the consequences of what might come out. So I think Michigan is a state that will be very difficult for Biden to win. Could he still win the presidency without Michigan? Yes, there's still a path for him. One other state, Minnesota, it's one of those states that's being talked about as likely, but I don't think Minnesota is as likely for Biden to lose like Michigan is. Another state that's not being talked about, but from my own analysis and from knowing, the Muslim population there, is the state of Virginia. So Michigan is number one in as far as percentage of sometimes people think Michigan has the most Muslims. No, Michigan does not have the most Muslims. New York does. New York and New Jersey. But as a percentage of the overall population, which is the important number to impact an electoral outcome, Michigan is number one as far as Muslims are concerned. Number two is the state of Virginia. So that's a state that that Biden should be concerned about. Plus, when you factor in the RFK factor, so that's one state that's not necessarily being looked at even by most pundits, but I'm personally watching it.
I think it's important to have that feedback, because a lot of times the reason why we don't look at certain things is because we don't have access to the individuals within the communities that we're discussing. And so we're talking about it in a broad sense term. But you are someone who's a part of the community, and therefore you can see what conversations are happening. And so Virginia is very interesting because we've had surprises from Virginia in the past before. Yes. And I believe that, unfortunately, Virginia just in general sometimes is overlooked. There might be one big key race that everyone focuses on, and then we might have an upset. But for a lot of times, Virginia does get overlooked. But I always pay attention to Virginia because living in this area, the DMV, we kind of had policies that are similar. Virginia might lead on having, conservative rules when it comes to how you get your driver's license, and then Maryland will follow and DC will follow and things like that. It could be something as something as small as that, and then sometimes it can be bigger things. So it is important to pay attention to that. Someone who's grown up here in the U.S. and has had the experience, like I said, with multiple communities, it's just very interesting from a historical perspective, because when we talk about what happened in 9/11, there was an experience that those who appeared as Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, South Asian Americans, that they had an experience whereby, it was a very high emotional time, and they did not have a positive experience. Anyone that I've gone to school with who talks about that time post 9/11, it was not a positive experience for them. During that time, however, there were some, especially in New York, some moments of solidarity when it came to the Muslim community and the Jewish community. Correct. As far as just protecting mosques and allowing individuals to be able to pray and to gather, because the devastation affected everyone. And so I've had that example in my very early years as an experience, and then we're fast forwarding to this time and we see something that's similar and different. So you do have these encampments on the universities where there is solidarity between two opposing sides. We also see where you have protests and counter protests, and both protests are peaceful, and everyone is highly charged, of course, because you're very passionate about it, but they are on separate sides and being peaceful about it. And then you see outbreaks of violence, and of course the way that the media is going to report that it's gonna depend on what the agenda of the media is. But we're living in a new era, because unlike during that time when I was a kid, now we do have TikTok and we do have Instagram, we do have people who are live streaming. And so as someone who did live in DC for a short period of time, there are some of my former neighbors and friends who are in DC, and I can see straight from their live feeds what is going on at the GWU encampment. And that is something that, caused me to call a friend of mine and said, hey, you might want to check on your daughter. I know that she goes to school over here. This is what's going on over there. And this was during one of the times where there was some violence that was happening at that encampment.
And when you talk about TikTok, now are you going to have the opportunity to see those TikTok videos in DC now that the US Congress has went ahead and banned it? And I think it's already been signed into law.
I don't know if it's I don't believe it has been signed yet,
not been
because
signed, but
what
I've
seen is that I've seen that there's a petition to make sure that it's not signed into law. We shall see how that continues to update. But what I will say about that is that it's very dangerous. There was a time when I was learning in school about how we had these amendment rights and how important they were, and many individuals who are not from the immigrant community might not know how hard we have to study these constitutional rights that are here in order for you to be able to get your citizenship, pass that test. And so many of us have this ingrained in our head. And then you come and see this and you're like, wait a second, this is not actually lining up. Because if I disagree, that doesn't mean that I am necessarily breaking the law, because I should have the ability to do that, right? And if you compare to other protests and other organizations, if I feel uncomfortable that Klansmen are walking and parading, but they have permits, they have freedom of speech. So what am I, they have freedom of speech. But if I come and walk the same street and I have a different perspective that is not approved by the entities those that may be, will I also be protected, or will the full force of the police be brought upon us? Universities are interesting because they're private. It's not the same as walking down a public street. So each university has a choice. Johns Hopkins University isn't having,
but the interesting thing is that these universities allowed, like all solidarity with Ukraine. There's a certain hypocrisy that I'm a Democrat, but there's a certain hypocrisy that has just come out that's just very difficult to digest. And for me personally, at the moment, I think at the level I'm in, it may not be very productive to go and try to understand it, because I think I gave you that example privately when the Muslim Council of Montgomery County was holding this candidates forum. One candidate was being asked, who's actually on the board, was being asked about, students in school being allowed to express solidarity with Palestine, and then she started talking about policies that the county does not allow and everything. But the interesting thing is that the same county allowed pro-Ukrainian protests, and this is where I think and this is one of those things where I think sometimes people on the liberal side become an easy target, because this is one of those incidents that has really exposed that aspect, especially on the liberal side, that's all about human rights and protecting the weak. This right here, and I don't know if it's an issue of a fear of the Jewish lobby, AIPAC, and the fact that they can hound you out of Congress or out of any elective seat.
That is one.
I don't know exactly what it is, but you can hear the lack of fluency. When it comes to this issue, where previously it would have been very easy. During the Iraq War, even during the Afghanistan war, there was a very easy fluency that came. But this one that has Israel touched, it's one thing that I think people in that liberal school of thought just need to sit back and reassess, because this right here has been a very difficult moment. And like I said, makes it easier to target them, because, there are people who are on the conservative side who talk about this hypocrisy. And the funny thing is that this time it's a unison between the Republicans and the Democrats. united with Israel, and people are finding it very difficult, with few exceptions like Bernie Sanders and a couple of other names. And of course, you have Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. I mean, of course, they're from the community, so it's understandable the stance that they'll take. But you have lions like Bernie Sanders, who you have to respect, who would stand up and speak when everybody else is choosing to be silent.
But you also, I think like with Bernie Sanders, nothing is really happening to him because he's Jewish. Him standing out to call out what Israel is doing, or even just paint the picture of the humanity. Like, I think I saw a clip earlier on where he was in Congress saying, you know what, he's calling out to CNN. You are out here taking pictures and videos of encampments and people protesting. How about if you go to Gaza and bring us pictures and videos of emaciated children? That is one. Two, most of these people are afraid of IPAC, because right now IPAC is really trying to primary AOC, Ilhan, and the lady from Rashida and the four ladies, the squad. I can't remember. And I think the lady from Atlanta or whatever,
from Mass. I believe she's from
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So there's that, and of course, you can say that the pockets are deep. They do not want to be primary, so they are, the IPAC is going to really pour money, and of course, that is for some, it's going to influence their decision on how to proceed when it comes to how to engage when it comes to Israel versus Palestine. Many of us growing up, and I've said this before, the images and the video and what we had been programmed to know was that Palestinians are us, are bad people. Israel is the chosen, they are God's chosen, and the movies, Moses, all that, we all knew that, and you're like, these guys, Israel, yeah, God's chosen or whatever. But the later years, like 4 years later, like when this hoopla started going about, like when you start reading about, the Oslo Accord, because you're trying to understand what is the beef. It's not until October 7. Now you start reading and understanding. It was not just October 7th. We are talking about 70 years. Even before 1948.
It's over 70 years.
It's over 70 years, 75. We're talking about before even 1948.
Yeah.
We're even talking about the 1917. And prior to that. And then you understand that Zionists themselves are like the KKK, they are the KKK, who have systematically managed to bamboozle, hoodwink, and had been able to hoodwink, bamboozle people into believing the narrative, because the aggressor is playing victim. But now, tumefungua macho.
Now, the interesting thing is that, and this is now the interesting part of being inside the community and seeing, like what's being said and what's happening. In a lot of Muslim communities you go, you will find different generations from the Nakba, from the original Nakba. Like most of that generation, like they've left us, but you still have a few who are surviving, who came here when they were maybe 9 years old. I mean, of course, now they're advanced in age. People who came from the different conflicts, the different generations. And then you have now those who've been born in America, like the Omar Suleimans, for example. And a majority of them who are now very vocal about this issue. I have some advice for Biden, and this is coming from inside, because things are looking very tough. Michigan, and I'm also adding Virginia to that list. I know Virginia is not a state that's being looked at, but I'm also adding it to that list for any consideration, because right now, like when we were here back in October, it was still fresh. I could see the shift, but I didn't realize how violent and how swift it would be, like a thunderclap. Because I'm talking about Muslims who are hardcore Democrats. You know, you have those casual, those ones who are not. Muslims who are hardcore Democrats who are like, you know, like, I'm out. So my advice, you know, like, there has to be, because November is coming soon. And of course, in all these protests that I've been attending, in November, we'll remember. That's what's being said. So my advice is, very quickly, find an unconditional ceasefire. You know, not this ceasefire of 6 weeks, we give room. That will no longer work. Unconditional, a permanent ceasefire. And then after the permanent ceasefire, there has to be a plan of a two-state solution, not like the one that was there, like I think in the 90s, the Oslo Accords.
Oslo Accords.
Yeah, no. This one, it has to be a very aggressive one. If you're ever, and I'm not saying this is going to win you back support of the Muslims, but for them to consider, for them to think about, should we forgive him? For them just to consider, because this thing has gone too far. 35,000 people is too many. So there has to be an unconditional ceasefire. And then number two, there has to be a permanent two-state solution, meaning the Palestinians control their own borders with no Israeli control at all, meaning that the Palestinians have a military with all kinds of weapons.
They are their own
Rockets,
country, in other words.
you know, like rockets, all kinds of weapons that a normal military has to protect themselves, because the Israelis have shown what they can do to them. So they should be allowed to do that. And then there should be an unconditional allowance of return, because now the Palestinians who are outside of Palestine, I think, are more than the ones who are inside. When you count the people who are in the US, in other parts of the world, there are more.
But wasn't there a UN resolution for the allowance, the right to return, that the Israelis have refused?
Israelis have refused.
But,
So now,
but even on paper, on United Nations,
Yes.
Charter, whatever,
so now,
and
yeah.
there has been.
there has been.
Yes.
But, you know, like, unfortunately, you know, like, and this is historically, you know, like, the Israelites have been notorious for not, what do you call it, respecting these contracts that they've signed, that they themselves are signatories, like the 1967 borders, which is what the UN currently recognizes. The Israelis don't care about them. They've been building settlements. So, and as far as borders are concerned, the starting point is the 1967. That's just a starting point. Without this and the unconditional return, meaning anyone who wants to return can return unconditionally, I think this might be a permanent move. And I'm saying this very categorically. This might be a permanent move by the Muslim community out of the Democratic Party. So this is a moment they have to be very careful about. I know maybe they look at us like, oh, they're not too many, but look at the impact of what those protests, when I started going, those immediate protests that happened in October, look at where they've morphed to now. You know, like, the people who are being called few, their impact will not be felt. This is, and this is just advice. You know, like, I know, Annette, you are a Democrat operative. You're in touch with the insiders. Please make them understand the depth of this. The only way I can compare this is the shift when, you know, like, when black people under Martin Luther King left. Was it during Martin Luther King? I don't remember whether it was that time, but when they switched from Republican to Democrat, and it became a permanent move. This is one of those moments. But to be clear, most Muslims, I mean, from what I've observed anecdotally, I'm not quoting any, there's no support for Trump. I'm not seeing any support for Trump. I'm not seeing any move, like going there. People are going towards a position of uncommitted. In a lot of ballots, there will be an option on the presidential to select uncommitted, and that's what people are being told to do in the primaries. That's what people are being told to do we of course saw that in Michigan, and there was quite a number of people who voted uncommitted. So I hope that sent a message, but this is a very unique time in history we're in. So
I think that this
before I was gonna say, University of Minnesota has reached an initial agreement with the pro-Palestinian campus.
Okay.
University of Minnesota, they've started caving. Annette?
Yes, there's another university that came to an agreement, and I wish I had that up. And
I think it was Wesleyan. Maybe
it was a smaller it was a smaller
a smaller school
university, and so we have our eyes on some of these bigger universities to see what's going on. I really appreciate the opportunity to just sit here and learn from you and hear from the perspective that you have, and then also other individuals within the community who are expressing their positions on this. And I think that it's really important when you're going out to the ballot not only to consider what's going on in Palestine as far as what the Muslim community is doing, but also understanding the solidarity that is there. And it's not monolithic. There really is this kind of black and white conversation that's saying that one side is Jews and one side is Muslims. And whenever I hear that, my first thought is, but they're Palestinian Jews. Like it's not, that is not what this conversation is.
There are a lot of Jewish people in the protests in DC and even in this campus protests.
So it's not as monolithic as the conversation is being said, right? And so the fact that someone is on one side doesn't mean that they're anti the other side. What we're really talking about is about where are the dollars going? If I am paying tuition for my student to go to this university, is that money then being invested in companies? And it's not as direct as the money is going straight to Israel. It's investing also in local companies that are benefiting, like Lockheed Martin or some of these manufacturing companies that then are using their manufacturing to send weapons and resources to aid in the death of many innocent individuals. And so with that being said, it's pretty broad that I think it's safe to say that many people would appreciate a ceasefire, and that it is not just one group of people who want a ceasefire. Many and the majority of individuals who understand the consequences of war wants there to be a ceasefire. Are they the ones who are being put on the news as much? Like you'll see more of the conflict in the news. But I will say that there are more people than you might think who want there to be a ceasefire and are actually actively working towards this. Every single movement that has happened in the United States has had protests. And the main key factor of those protests has been economic. And it's not just the students in the encampments who are asking for divesting. There are also donors who have removed their funding and their donations to these universities. In the very beginning, that's what we were talking about. We were not talking about encampments. We were talking about millionaire donors who are removing their endowments, who are removing the funding that they have been giving to these universities on a residual basis without question. And now they're saying, we're going to pull out this because we don't appreciate the behavior of your students. So this is very unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like that before. So the dollar battle is between, there's that on that side, and then there's the side of the students not wanting their dollars to go towards this. And I think both are very valid arguments. And at the end of the day, what happens and what we decide to do is going to have huge consequences for the future. So I want there to be peace. I want our communities to be able to come together again. I have seen, like I said before, I've seen beautiful moments in this country when it comes to coming together. And I know that change is uncomfortable for everyone involved. Right. So we'll see what happens in November. If you have a primary, I would just really encourage you guys to go vote in the primary. If you're choosing to vote in the primary, please make sure you have a plan so that if there's traffic, if any of those things happen, that you make a point to go, these votes have consequences. These consequences that we're seeing right now are ramifications of previous votes. And so what we do today is also going to have a ramification for the future and for our children.
Now, Rasvik says voting uncommitted will be the most dumbest thing, as in double negative, most dumbest. Voting uncommitted will be the most dumbest thing to do to show you're uncommitted in a general election. It's like those who voted against Baba due to his tribe, and now they are suffering. Now,
What a segue.
I would have agreed.
Wow.
No, I would have agreed with Rasvik if this was October 6th.
Huh?
If this was October 6th or before, I would have totally agreed with Rasvik on voting uncommitted is a dumb thing. But and this is, you know, like I'm one of those people who is politically very formed, in the sense, you know, like I have ingrained values that have been there for a very long time. So this is a very momentous time for me because I have never, you know, like had this experience.
I think it's important to understand what voting non-committed means, because I can understand what you're saying about October 6th versus now.
Yes.
People were not just saying vote uncommitted before. This is a strategy to actually get, now it's like getting a census. Can we see how many people are upset or affected by this issue? Because the issue is not on the ballot. So the
Correct.
only other way for us to get numbers about what people are thinking about this is to create a way to get numbers. And this is a very sterile way of talking about that. I understand that, but it's important for people to understand the mechanics. And I have to say, you know, like originally, you know, like after this happened, I wasn't sure how this was gonna work, but this pressure, I mean, it has worked. I mean, you've seen, you know, like Biden completely turn against Netanyahu, where he was before, like, oh, we're together, we're in this together. He, you know, like, despite the fact that he's still signing weapons to him and everything, but he has totally flipped on him. The language has changed.
The language has changed, and now you have people openly, you know, like very senior Democratic figures who are saying that Netanyahu should go away. You know, like he's now become, he moved from being, you know, like a close ally, a friend. He's now a liability. They just want him gone. And these are very senior figures within the Democratic establishment. And would this have happened if people were just docile, like, oh, you know, Trump might win? No, this would not have happened. But because of that pressure that has been very consistent, that initially when a lot of these protests started, they were majority Muslim. I can very comfortably tell you some of these protests, they are no longer majority Muslim. So many other people, you know, as they got to learn about the situation and everything, they've been joining in, including even members of the Orthodox Jewish communities, especially from New York. You know, like they've been part of organizations of some of these protests that we had. So Rasvik, I totally understand and identify where you come from, because that's where I was on October 6th. But because I'm in the community and this has been a day-to-day thing. There's no day since October 7th that I haven't interacted or, you know, like followed up or attended a talk. This has been a daily thing for us, you know, and especially even during Ramadan time. I'll tell you this. This is now children who are attending, you know, like, because our children normally attend madrasa to be taught Quran and everything. Guess what they're being taught now? They're being taught this history, you know, kids in a format that kids can understand. This was one of those things that they would say, you know, let's keep it away. But now they're starting to teach them, because these children, they're seeing these things happening. In as much as you think children are shielded, no, the children are seeing. They're seeing what's going on, and they're seeing there's a group of people being killed. And there was a kid, you know, like during Ramadan, there was a kid in the mosque who asked, you know, because there was a session with kids, and he asked if these people, you know, like they have these heavy weapons and they're killing us, why can't we also, you know, like buy weapons and try to fight them to protect? This is a child asking. So how do you respond to an 8-year-old who has seen these videos, like of defenseless people being killed. So I see where you're coming from, Rasvik. But again, like when it's one thing, like when you're looking at these things very abstractly, and then when you're in communities where people are talking about, first of all, verifiable history, and number two, they're talking about people who've been in those places, people who are from Gaza. Like in almost in any masjid you go, you will find people who've either been there, who've lived there, or who are children of the first Nakba or the Intifada. So this this came very close that it became so difficult for me to try to bring out logic. Like I would try to bring out logic, because now you're being hit by facts, you're being hit by reality, and you're being bombarded by these images of, you're seeing this genocide happening live, and it continues, and laws are being signed to send more weapons. The people who are supporting these people with weapons are also sending in food, while these other people are blocking the food from getting in. So it's just one of those very, very iconic moments, I would call it, for me personally, because in all the years I've been following Kenyan politics, American politics, I've personally never had a moment like this, and not forced by anyone, just from experience, what I've seen, and what has been going on in the community. So Ras, I just want you to, I know it's difficult to understand this from the outside, but I just tried. This is a very surface level way, of explaining it, but it is what it is. At this point, we are like, this is the man who was on the driver's seat. He let over 35,000 people get killed. He kept signing laws to allow more weapons to go there. While he's saying one thing, he's doing another thing. So it's very difficult to start comparing, it's kind of like saying, like you have a spouse who's maybe walking out and has infidelity, and then they come and tell you, oh, by the way, even if you go marry another person, they will also do the same thing. You have to deal with
what is present,
with whatever is present, but which is what we are dealing with.
But
right
what
now.
To your point also, and I think Ras, remember when Trump came into power, the first thing that he did was what? Institute the Muslim ban.
Yeah.
What worse could he do if he comes back into power?
Yeah.
Because even if you're talking about cutting aid to who?
Yeah.
You're gonna cut aid to what? Saudi Arabia? Whatever. So what aid is going? What worse can be done than has already been done by Trump?
Yeah.
I would like to know.
Yeah.
So that is one thing, because here he says, what will they accomplish should Trump win? Listen, Trump won in 2016. Immediately he instituted a Muslim ban, and there was all upheaval and whatever in 7 countries.
Yeah, and I remember we went for a protest. Went for a protest, and this was also at that protest at Massachusetts Avenue when that initial Trump ban was instituted when he came to power.
Yeah, radical, wild, and will cut aid funding for them. That's fine. What has not been done? I mean, there's aid and whatever, but even locally, Muslims are just getting attacked.
In all fairness,
nonsense.
In all fairness to Biden, he's done very well in everything else.
Yes.
But 35,000 deaths is just very difficult.
Because the issue,
he's done well on the economy, on all these other aspects
fronts.
in defense to Biden.
Yes.
He's done well.
Yeah, Washeke, yes, and went to Jerusalem. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, at some point, you have to be willing to stand for something. Because I think we've had this thing where some people say, I'd rather die on my knees.
I'd rather die on my, is it on my feet than
live on my knees.
Than live
like
on my knees.
There's something like that. Something like that. At some point,
Eric Killmonger.
Yeah, there was that. I'd rather be
Wakanda.
Wakanda,
Yeah.
when and be thrown in the ocean, take the route of my ancestors. At some point, you have to make a stand. And again, not necessarily voting for Biden would mean, yes, that Trump may win. But at sometimes your principle, you have to stand by your principle. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean
that it's just that.
I would have been in 100% agreement with last week on October 6th.
Right, but
we live in a different world right now. This is the 9/11 after 9/11. Because they were saying October 7th will be the 9/11 for Israel, but now this is kind of like a slow motion genocide like we've never seen before. I know we've really gone out of time.
We have, and I think it's really important to understand that when you are here in the United States, you need to understand how things work out here in the United States. And one of the most critical times, if you are lobbying for something, whether you're a pharmaceutical lobbyist, whether you're a small activist, or whether these largest groups that are happening right now, right before the election is so critical as far as getting your the things that you find important for it to be communicated right before election is where a lot of these things happen, is where a lot of these conversations happen. And then you hold that person who gets elected accountable throughout their term. So it's very important to understand that this is not some frivolous thing. This is an organizing, strategizing, lawyers and those who understand campaigns came up with this strategy and said, this is what we need to do, and we need to do this so that the numbers can reflect. And again, back to the numbers, like, what do the numbers say? And if there's a consequence whereby they're not going to vote for Trump because of exactly what you said, very important point. They're not going to vote for Trump. But if they don't vote for anyone at all, it still has an impact.
Yes, it does.
And there is someone who is sitting down and looking at those numbers. This is like, if you are an actuary and you love this stuff, this is your dream, right? You get to look at these numbers and see the implications and see what percentage points this has an impact for. And so right now, I promise you, as much as we are seeing a response that is not, that is, feels lackluster, there are people who are currently working and seeing what these numbers are, what they mean, what does this mean for our campaign, and what can we do to address these issues. They're not just sitting and being quiet and going to bed quietly. They understand that this is an issue, and the only reason why they understand this and the way that they understand this is because we see these numbers coming in, we see what's going on the campuses, and we see who is responding, who is pushing back even though certain voices are being shut down, who's deciding to push back against that. All of this is really important to see. So this is just primary talk. We will be back. We will be back in
This is just a taste.
This is just a taste.
We will be back.
Because there's the woman vote.
This is like the appetizer.
There is the woman vote and reproductive rights. Oh, you had an appetizer, yes.
Yeah.
By
the way, iyo hapo, yeah, that one might need an episode on its own.
No. It's gonna need
especially
an episode
the Supreme Court, and what they might likely do and what they've already been doing.
Huyo anarudi kutupatia.
Again, they also have their strategies. They are also doing their own things. This idea of states issues, when I first heard it, I didn't understand the ramifications. So.
And then the interesting thing that people don't pay attention to, I know a lot of people pay attention to the Supreme Court, but over 90% of the cases get decided in lower courts. They never make it to the Supreme Court. So, and these are the spaces where Trump packed a lot of judges with lifetime appointments, some of them in their early 30s.
Right.
So these are people who are going to be in the system for a very long time, like passing, these cases or making, or negating, like 50 years, 70 years of precedents. That, and it's already happening down there.
Right.
It's just that it's not making it to the news, because the news mostly focuses
once
on the Supreme Court.
Upper courts.
Yeah.
And that is why, like Annette said and Ali said, and Omosh, even if he's been quiet, elections have consequences.
Yes, they do.
Know who you're voting for. Apo katikati. Locally. Because some elections are locally. I'm telling you,
local elections are very important.
I've been understanding that elections are local very well, because like Annette said, You may look at somebody and he is a Republican, but he is locally too, hapo MCA, si kaloko hapo tu huyo. But it resonates with what your stand is, whatever he's championing your cause, whatever your cause is, right? You're like, okay, I'll give this guy. You know, if it's school board, might find a guy like maybe this guy is, you know,
school board is non-partisan,
non-partisan,
so you can independently look
whatever.
at each individual. Yeah.
So like just Soma, ingia your local place, your district, anzia hapo to your county where you live, city, wherever you are. Just understand.
Just go to your county's website. Each county, I believe, does have a website, and just look at the different departments they're in, or just go to where it says services. Look at the services they offer, and then from there, you can start figuring out, oh, you know, like I didn't know I could get this service from the county. Then you can make a determination.
Right.
Uno Mike.
Well,
Annette had something to say first.
I think, you know, one of our listeners was suggesting that I come out to some of these other areas and talk about these other areas, and I would love to do that. What I want to do is let's set up and figure out a way that we can start educating people also locally, right? So we talk about Maryland, but this is a blueprint. Understand how things are happening here, but then look, okay, so do we have a county executive? Do we have a mayor? Do we have, you know, what's our school board looking like? Look at it and see what it looks like in your area, wherever you are, and then, you know, invite me.
Yeah, and that's important because we know a lot of Kenyans, they know their MCA, they know their cattle dip supervisors, but they don't know who's representing them locally. Even if they met them in the supermarket, they don't know who they are. And this is where you've been living for the last 20 years.
Yep.
So...
And I've met my representatives in the supermarket, so...
Yeah.
You know, they are that local.
Yeah, they're that local, you know, like...
Not like Ali's people.
Who he has never met.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, me, I've met my people. I don't know who you're talking about.
Wait, didn't he not just say that
He
he
said
has
at the
never met?
beginning.
Yeah, he said it, He has said that,
It's okay.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
it's all
We were
right.
paying attention.
It's called conditional amnesia.
Okay. Na wahenga walinena, na wahenga walinena, na wahenga
You guys
walinena.
didn't talk about rain, but okay, tunene.
Wahenga walinena kilicho na mwanzo, hakina budi kuwa na mwisho. Meli imetia.
No.
We are about to wrap this puppy up. Parting shot, Annette, before you come back.
And you gotta be sooner because this gap was from October to May.
Now,
so much has happened.
That's like
imagine,
that's
look,
almost 22 months.
You took it's
Who
35,000 people.
Did you guys ghost
have
me or did I
disappeared.
ghost you? I don't know.
No, you ghosted us.
Did I ghost
What do you mean?
Listen,
us. Wasn't she going on a trip somewhere?
No, she wasn't going anywhere. But you know, I mean, you know,
Or she's talking about gold?
no, because you know she's bringing up stuff for Nyuma ya tent. I may let her hapa kwa kiwanja.
Yeah.
Didn't she tell us that at one point, whatever, then I'll just disappear for a while? Anyway, tutapeleka Nyuma ya tent.
People have memories.
You
Hey!
better ask somebody.
Yeah.
Conditional
People have
amnesia.
elephant memories here.
Conditional
Oh my
amnesia.
goodness. My name is Annette Karanja. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am so excited to come and talk about these issues. If you have questions next time, please be prepared and call in. Let me know what your questions are and what areas are interesting to you. Again, Annette Karanja, thank you and good night.
How do you even say anything after that? Because so hard. Oh, sorry. Yes. Annette Karibu, as usual. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, the political jib-jab, the know-how, and you know how the races are turning out. It's the primaries, yes. In Maryland, like we said, early voting has already started. It started, yesterday? Through the 9th. And then when is election day? The
14th.
The 14th.
May 14th.
Yep. So, again, you can go online, find out what's going on, but early voting is 7 to 7, so I think it is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. all through. So I would take advantage of early voting if I were you, but hey, what do I know? You have Saturday and Sunday to go ahead and do this. So again, this is in Maryland, so wherever your jurisdiction is, check it out, find out who the candidates are, see who is doing things for you, can make change for you and your immediate community where you're paying taxes, because that's the whole point behind all of this. So make sure you check those things out. With that said, Mikasi tuko na wewe, tuko pamoja. Mika had to take a trip to Kenya, and we'll give further details on what's going on that end. But Mika, we are with you, and that's why Mika didn't attend the show today and wasn't contributing. But again, that's where we are. Kesho, hippie music, OneMic is a model. Fait en prem. How do you say it, OneMic?
Fait en prem.
Ish. Okay. Fete en après. Yes, the day parties have started. They start tomorrow. Ali, you have sneakers, right?
Of course I do.
Okay, then you might be able to show up. OneMic has some things that those
Timberlands.
sneakers. What's the one? Those are those sneakers. I don't know what they are.
They're called Timberlands.
Hata hiyo angekuja nayo, but hizo ako nazo.
Ana hizo pia.
Boss.
Okay.
No. Maybe he could wrap his Tusker t-shirt around his shoes.
Okay.
Yeah, they could become. But anyway,
You see the shit they talk about Baltimore?
So
we're talking about OneMic. No Baltimore.
Specifically,
Let's be clear.
OneMic.
Trust me.
It was
Specific.
specifically
You want to
OneMic.
trigger them, say Timberlands and Tusker t-shirts. Watch.
Annette, do you even know what a Tusker t-shirt looks like?
Allah?
Do you even have one?
Allah? I feel so insulted.
Why you? No. Because you see, as you're going and in your insult,
Stand back.
you and OneMic would be in the
Stand
same
back.
WhatsApp group,
Stand
and I
back.
don't think you want to be in that WhatsApp group.
Stand back,
Yeah.
and stand
Yeah.
by. Finish.
Continue.
Yes, you don't want to be in that WhatsApp
Yeah,
group.
maybe she has Timberlands.
I don't have Tim's. I don't.
Yeah, then you see,
Then
could
you're,
be
then you're not
in
in
the same
that
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp group.
Yeah, you're not. There's no way you couldn't be. Could you?
I don't think.
Yeah, see, not at all. Yes, to our listeners, thank you. And to what was it?
One them.
One dem 99. Yes, one dem 99. Thank you for coming through. To all our regular listeners, you know who you are. We appreciate you. You're the reason why we do this. And to our brothers and sisters who are being inundated by crazy weather, poleni tuko pamoja. I know I was in a group where a tech group where somebody asked an interesting question. They said, we're all Kenyans. Our people are suffering. What can we do from here? And it's something I'm thinking about as we continue going and chambering through the week. But whichever way you can contribute, whichever way you can help, just do it at the level that you have the capacity to do it. You just don't know who you would be helping, because there's some very, very devastating things going on, and there's not enough boots on the ground or enough resources being moved towards that. I'm glad the president declared that schools will be closed indefinitely.
Incompetent.
That at least will leave us in a certain place, and we know that people are not going to be moving around Adharani. But still, where we are now,
Competence.
we should never be we shouldn't be here. There was money that was given out for El Nino last year,
Waligula.
and the counties have a kitty that they're supposed to be going to.
Walikula.
See you guys next week.
All right, asante sana DJ Mosh Fire. Of course, very sad times for Kenya. Unfortunately, we were not able to talk about the tragedy, the floods that are currently ongoing in Kenya. I mean, just to quickly piggyback on what Omosh Fire just said, I have a background in disaster management. I've worked for a company that does disaster management. So, I was told to sometimes stop criticizing Kenya too much. And we love Kenya, and the reason why we are here. And last week, we were branded as cultural ambassadors by Balozi Big Ted. Not us. We are not the ones who call ourselves cultural ambassadors.
Yep.
Yeah. But he said we're cultural ambassadors because we're here every week talking about things that are either directly or indirectly related to Kenya. And we've been doing this for so many years. So this is coming from a very good space. So the problem that I was looking at in Kenya, because the disaster management company that I worked for, it was taken over by another company. I don't even know what the new company is called. But typically, it's never, disasters are natural. These are natural disasters. You cannot stop an act of God from happening. But what you need is preparation. It is more important than the money. You know, because people are talking about money. What we have is a lack of preparation, you know, and a flood is a known disaster. You know, there's certain unique disasters that may be unknown, but a flood is a known disaster, so there was clearly no plan. There was clearly no plan. There was a lot of responsiveness, and then there was a lot of second guessing. Is this rain gonna go away? Is what the meteorological department saying accurate? Imvua itaisha. So that was the problem that we have. And these plans actually at very different levels. They start from the very ground, from the very basic community levels. I mean, you know, right here, like inside your home, like even sometimes, like when you drive around roads nearby, you'll see something that says snow emergency route. So those are local plans. And even within your own household, there's certain things that you're told, you know, like when this happens, go to the basement or this. So they start from a very basic level, then they start going to the emergency responders that are closest to you. This is what they're going to be doing in such a situation, such that when that incident happens, it's just replaying the drill and not trying to invent a wheel. So that's the problem that we've had. Those scenes that we've seen are so sad, of
Disturbing.
people living, people like sleeping on top of mabati rooftops. That was, I mean, that really, you know, like, it's something that I never thought that I would see, especially in Nairobi. There's parts of Kenya that are prone to floods like Budalangi, but I don't think we've seen floods like this in Nairobi before.
No.
We've seen floods, but not floods like this.
This is
Yeah.
This
This is
level,
very
bro.
crazy.
It's unprecedented.
So hopefully, I hope the government, the national government, the county government will get itself together, and they will be able to help the people, because now you have people who are going to be permanently displaced and some people who are going to need shelter for a long time to come. So I hope there's a plan towards that. I want to thank Annette Karanja so much for coming through. Asante sana. I like the idea of using what you're doing in Maryland as a blueprint and maybe identifying people in other places, because at the end of the day, you're not going to know the local issues in Texas.
No.
You're not going to know the local issues in Georgia or Michigan. Liaising with a local person who knows the local issues and maybe just directing them that this is where you need to go, this is what you need to do. And then we have kind of like a setup, like the way we do on Kenyan issues, where we start handling local issues that we're handling day to day. So I think that's a good idea. That's something that we should think about. Maybe Slay, you could be our contact in Texas, and you start educating people in Texas on what they need to do, and maybe this may come out to something else. With that said, you know, like the president is gonna be coming. I think it's gonna be on the 23rd of May. Official invite by the White House. We are yet to see, you know, like how that will benefit Kenya. I don't know if there'll be any benefit for the diaspora. We are yet to find out. We're going to try to figure that out. And we are going to try, I can't promise anything, but we're going to try to get someone from that delegation to come to the studio if they agree. You know, if they agree to come to the Kilimanjaro studio so that they can tell us what they're doing. Na kwa hayo machache, yote ambaye anataka kunipigia simu, nambari yangu bado ni ile ile 1-800 mteule. Operator akishika simu, mwambie unataka kusema na mjukuu, na akikuuliza ni mjukuu yupi, mkumbushe ni mjukuu yule yule wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui na sibagui. Kwaherini.
Aiden, Daddy loves you. Jerry, Daddy loves you. Nemo, Daddy loves you. Until next week, be blessed.
Hey. You copy. It's kama ni uduna block energy star zone flani niko peaceful fully focus ni do ya unruly sense iko juu kubishana na ile vibe man udu na